Oh, for sure. Alrighty. We are live. How's it going, everybody? 5 people waiting, 7 likes already. That seems completely impossible. I don't know how you guys did that, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Okay. How are we all doing this morning? Are we ready to go? 7 viewers. See, now it makes sense. Now the world's okay. Own face, gone fleet stream. Oh, let's see. We're waiting for Nightbot to want to kick into gear, and then we'll kind of get into introductory type stuff. Liv, remind me, which picks I'm covering odd numbers, you're covering even, yeah?
Yes, you're covering odd numbers, I'm covering even numbers.
Perfect. Got in right as it started. Welcome, Banette Bandit. How's it going? Streaming on YouTube, this feels weird, man. It's been a minute. I'll look at Nightbot. It's just ready to go. Okay, perfect. Dude, my mom has a radar for things when I'm doing things. I literally just start streaming, she calls me. Sorry, Ma, you gotta wait 3 hours. It always happens.
Oh, no. My mom does the same. I feel it. Okay, there we go. Yep, perfect.
Perfect.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so, with that being said, well, first, I think audio should be fine. I don't think I have music too loud. But, how's it going, everybody? Good morning. Welcome to NCP Season 6's draft stream, hosted by yours truly, as well as OliviaSama. Do you want to say hi?
Hi. That's all I'm saying.
That's it. That's all you need to say. We're going to be hosting the draft stream today. You're going to see our wonderful coaches this season, which you can all check out in the description below. Each one of them is linked, as well as there's a command for each one of them. So, like you just saw, Tony put Verdeerling, which it should work. I don't know why it's not. Or you saw Liv put Oldale, and popped up with her channel. So if you see a coach, you really like their team, and you want to check them out in the description below, and check out their season, you can go ahead and do so. Draft analysis should be going up live after we upload this today. I know a lot of coaches have it scheduled for about 3 hours from now. So that's when a lot of coaches you'll see their draft analysis go live. And yeah, is there anything else I'm missing, Liv?
I will say as well, during rounds 1, 6, and 11, the first round, the midpoint, and the last round, for each coach's picks, you'll be posting the commands for each one, just so you guys can get familiar with them, and make sure you're subbing. I'm not going to do it at every pick, because that would be annoying, obviously, but I'll make sure to do it for you guys, so that way then if you see something you like, or as you're going on, something that you're starting to enjoy for a team,
exactly. Exactly. Terrence, how's it going? DRA in the chat, of course, plugging himself as he should.
Of course.
But yeah, with that being said, I think we're ready to go, are we not?
Yeah, I think we are.
Perfect. So, pick one. I should kind of preface this. In the NCP, we didn't do anything crazy, right? We're not doing UPBA like S tiers. We're not doing BBL Ubers. We're not doing LC, low tier, anything like that. The only thing different that we're doing this season is we're going to be testing in some mons that you typically see allowed in the Showdown community in a lot of leagues, in Zamazenta Crowned and Landorus Incarnate with Sheer Force allowed into the league, and seeing how they function in a Galar Dex meta and things like that. So as you might imagine, those will be going pretty early on. It's just a matter of where they go. I just wanted to preface that if you kind of see some mons last a little bit longer than they should. And yeah, with that being said, let's jump into it. Drop a like if you guys are tuning into the stream. I would really appreciate it. And yeah, let's do it. First up, we have Sally Mumble picking up Landorus Incarnate with Sheer Force, one of the shiny new toys, with a good reason picking this thing up too. This thing is an absolute monster, with that base 101 speed tier being really, really solid, as well as Sheer Force on top of its really, really solid special attack stat, and really spammable moves in Earth Power and Sludge Wave and Rock Slide and things like that. This thing realistically has very little defensive counterplay, whether it be from the specially offensive side, from a mixed sense with knockoff or U-turn as for momentum and things like that, or even from a physical Swords Dance perspective. I think people kind of tunnel vision on Lando-I sometimes and think like, if it's Sheer Force, you're running special Earth Power a lot of the time. No, you can definitely run mixed, you can definitely run physical. Also, like I said, has access to U-turn, setup options in Calm Mind, Swords Dance, and Rock Polish. Great rocker, spreads knocks, great Pokemon overall. I definitely see why you wanted to try out the new toy with the first overall pick. Next up, though, we have Dragapult. Liv, do you want to talk about Dragapult for Hayes here?
Yeah, of course. I think Hayes got the real first round pick, personally. There's just really nothing that compares to Dragapult. This is one of the fastest Pokemon that we allow in the format, with very few things that are actually viable outpacing. Really, the only one that I can think of that we allow in this format would really just be Zeraora, because stuff like Electrask, they're not really like super viable picks, but they're acceptable. But in terms of top tiers, this is pretty much as fast as it gets. It's as much of a mixed attacker as Zeraora is, except for it leans a little bit more towards the physical than neutral split, but it is still a very good mixed attacker. Has some really good setup too. In fact, if you didn't think the speed was enough, Dragon Dance get even faster somehow. With the Dragon Dance or a Scarf, you're able to outpace even a majority of weather sweepers in this format. Stuff like Excadrill and Kingdra cannot even use weather with plus speed natures to outpace this. It's just that gross. Dragapult also has a phenomenal typing, great utility. I think that truly this is the first pick. So congratulations, Hayes. You may have gotten second here, but you're first in our hearts.
100%. And I get why Sally took the Lando-I first overall. New choice syndrome, the monster dope. I probably would have went Pult first overall too, though. I won't lie, that mon's crazy. Next up, though, we have Big T-Ro in the chat picking up Urshifu Single Strike. You want to talk about a brain dead Pokemon? That's going to be Urshifu right here. Really just throwing off big wicked blows. Excuse me, throwing off big wicked blows, big close combats. Really having very little to zero defensive counterplay in the format. You have fairies, but those are, you know, very liable to get chipped down via U-turn and hazards and things like that, as well as honestly just being slowly put into a KO range from a banded wicked blow. Incredibly hard to guard against, and if he can grab, you know, a sufficient pair with it, something that really punishes those fat fairies as they want to come in, he's gonna have a great time this season. I love Urshifu. I think it's an amazing Pokemon. I used it in BBL most recently and won a championship with it. I know T-Ro used it in SBU and won a championship with it, so he's obviously very comfortable with it, and I'm sure he's gonna kill it with it. Next up, we have another new toy in Zamazenta. Talk about Zamazenta, Liv.
So I'll be honest, I am really excited actually that we did allow Zamazenta. I have been preaching for this mon to be allowed for over a year now. So seeing that we finally did allow it, it truly was a nice thing to see. Now, do I think it should have went this pick? Honestly, I'm a little bit shocked it didn't go sooner. Not that I think it deserves going sooner. I'm just shocked that, like Lando-I, it didn't go earlier to new toy. But Jesse did get a really strong pick. Now, to be fair, I definitely do think that there were better picks currently, like stuff such as Tornadus-T and Mew were better picks, but Zamazenta still does offer a lot. It's a really strong 128 speed mon, which is really obnoxiously fast for this format, and Fighting Steel is still a really good typing, actually, offensively speaking, with actually a really okay setup option in Howl. I don't know, a lot of people look down on it because it's not like a Sword Dance or a Bulk Up, but Zama can honestly pull this off pretty well, so I definitely do think that Jesse got a really strong start to his team. Also, I forgot to plug the other two teams, so I'm going to do that really quickly.
No, you're all good. I got a couple of them going. But yeah, Zama's going to be great. It's great on balance, and I think you touched on it, that speed stat, along with its bulk, is really annoying, making this thing a phenomenal tank. So, great Pokemon overall.
One thing I will say, though, is that as a crutch for Zamazenta, obviously with its phenomenal stats, sadly, this is a Pokemon that actually is very susceptible to hazards, especially something like webs to make it get revenge off, but even more so than that, I would say the worst thing for it is going to be spikes, so hopefully Jesse can get some really good removal to round this out later on.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Just Kurt, speaking of Mew, grabbing the Jack of all trades round 1 here at pick, I believe 5. So all the cool stuff going, Kurt grabs, you know, that Jack of all trades mon, and Mew really does so many things phenomenally. I personally love Mew in that fat defensive stall breaker role. I think it performs it phenomenally, but obviously it can Dragon Dance up, it can Swords Dance and Bulk Up and Nasty Plot, it can be a phenomenal pivot with U-turn, it gets spikes and rocks and a bunch of cool options. So this Pokemon is really great, obviously, at doing everything very well. It's not going to be exceptional at any one thing, but it's going to do a lot of great things really well, and that's great. I think if Kurt can draft a team that doesn't rely or pigeonhole Mew into one specific role, he's obviously going to have a good time with it as long as he grabs sufficient breakers around it. Really, I see when you draft Mew, I think you should draft Mew as if you draft around Mew as if you don't have it, and then you know, fix and plug Mew in each matchup as you go and kind of mold it to what you need. So I know Kurt's going to enjoy it. I believe he recently used this in... I know he recently used a Mew. I don't remember where, but it's a mon that he definitely knows how to use well. It was IBA, his last IBA season. So he'll definitely do really well. Maybe he can pick up a Gengar or a Weavile later on and, you know, have a good time. Next up, though, we have Amel. Oh my goodness, you get to explain Amel picks every time. Have fun.
Oh, right. Hey, and you want to start doing even picks?
Yeah. No, I do have a fun game, though. I want you guys in the chat, right? I want you guys, because Amel, he's a very interesting guy. He likes to draft weird things all the time, obviously. I want you guys to try and guess his drafting theme, what he is going for. I don't think you'll be able to, but I want to see if you guys can do it. What shenanigans, what theme team is Emil trying to draft this time? Each round you'll be able to see, and I'll reveal it at the end, and I don't think any one of you is going to get it. If any one of you get it, I don't know, you guys can think of something for me to do, because I really do not think anybody of you that is not in the league or has been told already knows what it is. So that'll be the fun thing. We can just talk about the Pokemon individually when Emil comes up.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's not even just the fact that Emil picked Entei right now. I just don't think the Mon is that good. One of those Pokemon that's like a really bait 11-point Pokemon, and Emil really tortured himself with it. Like it's, I can't even say what I was going to say, but this is definitely one of the worst Pokemon that Emil got, I will say. And I'll leave it at that. That's the kindest thing I could say about this. I'll be honest. I think it's actually lower end for the cost.
I will say, I was a big Entei hater. I used it in BBL recently, though, and it didn't come to every matchup, but I liked it more than I thought it would. It performed better than I...
It
performed better than I thought it would, so I definitely give it a shot.
Yeah. I don't know. I really just don't see it. I've tried Entei a few times this gen.
We have physical offense and avatar, so we'll see. None of those are it. I will not lie. As soon as someone gets it, I'll let you know, but you're not going to be... I promise you, I will be flabbergasted if anybody gets Emil's drafting theme. Next up, though, we have Big Torn-T falling to what? Really late, in all honesty, thanks to Emil, and thanks to the new toys allowed. Keegan right here grabbing this. A new player to the Wi-Fi scene, grabbing a fan favorite and one of the best Pokemon in the format, in all honesty. Has the best ability in the game in Regenerator. Can U-turn and pivot around. This thing is a knockoff and U-turn bot. Realistically, you're not even clicking Hurricane 90% of the time with this mod. It is a bit inaccurate, but it also has the luxury of being able to afford clicking Hurricane, maybe missing, and just U-turning out and getting your health back. So it's really completely fine. It can also nasty plot up in specific matchups, I think. We see that used a little bit more on Wi-Fi than on Showdown, but Torn-T is so reliable at what it does in knockoffing and taunting and hurricaning and just being a general nuisance throughout the game, being a phenomenal pivot. And if you can build a solid team around it, I'm sure Keegan will have a good time for sure.
Yeah, one thing I will say with the Torn-T pick, I do think that in the hands of Keegan, especially with someone who has as high tier experience in terms of like really strong competitive leagues as Keegan does, because Keegan's played in so many different like really high skill events, and he's gotten to work with a lot of really competent builders doing so, as well as himself being a really competent builder. I do think that this is a Pokemon that really does shine in terms of the prep side rather than the playing side, in my opinion. Though it can obviously really take advantage of playing as well. So sure. I am looking forward to seeing what Keegan can actually do with this Pokemon, because it is a really top tier Pokemon, and I think this truthfully could have went in like the top 4 or 5. But
it has such a high skill ceiling too. Like people who use really Torn well are gonna have a great time. So I'm sure Keegan will do well with it. Definitely go check him out. I believe this is going to be his first upload league, so definitely go check him out in the chat right there.
It's actually his second one. He did a Gen 7 one way back in the day.
Oh shit! Did not know that. Okay, next up we have Aquarius. Do you want to talk about Aquarius's Zapdos?
Yeah, sure. I don't like that Aquarius took this. I wanted it.
I was gonna say it's not that bad of a round 1 pick.
No, it's a fine. I mean, I think it's a little early? Yeah, but like I wasn't getting it round 1. I was getting it round 2. So I don't like this. I don't like that it went right now. But it is a really good pick. Honestly, I do think that Zapdos doesn't get enough respect personally in draft. It's one of those Pokemon that it truly is. I think, while not as good as Mew is at the job, it is another one of those like jack of all trades sort of Pokemon. It's a really good offensive Pokemon. And personally, one of the things I really love doing with Zapdos is drafting like a really soft Rain Core. Now, I wouldn't really go aggressive with it, but opening up access to stuff like Weather Ball and 100% accurate Hurricane makes this Pokemon hell to switch around offensively.
For sure.
And defensively, it still has a lot going for it, with 2 really good abilities in Static and Pressure. Pressure really good to stall out a lot of PP on opponents, and Zapdos is truthfully one of the easiest Pokemon to take advantage of this ability, not just because it's one of the best with it that we allow, but I think in Zapdos' stat pool as well as typing really do make it easy to stall out PP. So I think in Zapdos really doesn't have that going for it, as well as typing with Static being really useful. This is a Pokemon that can check a lot of good physical fightings, as well as stuff like Rillaboom and Kartana on the physical grass end. So I do think that Zapdos actually does open up a lot of options for round 2. There's really not a bad round 2 Pokemon actually that Aquarius could get in my eyes, unless if it was something like a Tapu Koko or a Zeraora, which will probably go round 1 anyway.
Oh, for sure. No, definitely a great pick. I love Zapdos, and like you said, I think sub pressure sets are actually really, really slept on, and something we don't see in the Wi-Fi scene a lot. But I love me some like sub pressure stalling Zapdos, maybe sub toxic things like that. Next up, we have Kaz picking. Speaking of Zeraora, we have this thing going round 1 here to Kaz. Phenomenal Pokemon. Honestly, a Pokemon I love a lot. And another Pokemon with a really high skill ceiling. So I think Zera is going to be a great pick for Kaz. I know he's very comfortable with it as well. But that base 143, I want to say speed tier is great. Great physical breaking capabilities with, Plasma Fist, knockoff, play rough, close combat, a bunch of cool stuff like that. Even Fire Punch and Blaze Kick, I believe. As well as being solid from the special side with Grass Knot for fat grounds, which is really, really important as an electric. Having that option to hit fat grounds is really, really important in my mind. So I think that's definitely a great thing that Zeraora has going for it. As well as Volt Switch for momentum. I believe sub-toxic sets are going to be really, really solid as well for this thing to really wear down annoying, fatter teams and things like that. So I love Zera. I think it's a great mon to build around, and it's just a great glue centerpiece. And I think Kaz will obviously, perform really well with it here this season. Okay, next up, we have my pick, but I'm not going to talk about my pick because that's my draft analysis. You talk about my pick.
Yes, Owen and I decided that we were going to be talking about each other's picks, hence why we're going odd and even. So funny enough, I'm actually right after Owen, it worked out perfect for doing this. So I'm going to be talking about Owen's pick, because if you want to see Owen's pick, you can check out Owen's pick later today. But Owen got not round 10. Oh my god, I almost made that sound so much more scary
That would
than
have been sick.
Owen got pick 10 Garchomp, and I'm still going to say the same thing I was going to say whether round 10 or pick 10. I hate that you got this so late. This is a really, top tier Pokemon. It's really abusable. That speed stat as well in Galar goes so ridiculously far. Just breaking the 100 ceiling alone for such a really good offensive Pokemon it's surprisingly hard to do without getting something that's very underwhelming. And I know that there's a lot of Pokemon that break 100 in Galar, but getting something that's truly so demanding of prepping for that speed tier, it's basically stuff like Garchomp, Lottie, for the Pokemon that hit the near 100 ceiling. It's like Garchomp, Lottie, Lando-I, I guess now, but there really is not a lot that hit just over that 100 mark. So having Garchomp already is really nice. This is a really good rocker. It's a really versatile Pokemon too. Funny enough, I know a lot of people just think of Garchomp as a Scale Shot Sweeper or a Scarf User, but this is a really good defensive check again, that a lot of people don't usually take advantage of. On top of that as well, Garchomp also being a really strong ground type does already give 1 immunity, as well as the typing with Dragon Ground is also a really just obnoxious type to switch around. So I'm actually really looking forward to seeing your season with this mon. I think it's quite literally, if I had to pick anything on the board, this is probably the most Owen Pokemon left on the board. So I cannot imagine you will not perform with this.
Okay. That's the plan, at least. We'll see. Next up, we have Liv streaming. Again, like she said, I'm going to be explaining her picks here. And we have Big Clefable, incredibly moldable Pokemon, fits on so many different play styles, and performs admirably in really everything that it does. Whether it be that fat rocker, that defensive check to, X-Fighting type, being a Calm Mind Sweeper, being a Wish Passing Cleric, being a Teleport Momentum Mon. It has great abilities in Magic Guard and Unaware, and really deceptively bulky stats. If you actually look at Clutch stats, it really does not look like it should live the hits that it does. But for some reason, this mon's not 2-hit KO by anything without a Life Orb, which is really, really clutch in a lot of instances. So I think Clefable is going to be obviously a great mon to start off with, and there's a ton of different directions you can go from here. So it's just kind of to be seen where Liv will go from round 1 Clefable. All right, next up, bam, we have Aegislash and Dr. Slacking. Do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, finally a pick that I don't necessarily hate that it went right now. Aegislash, it's the first one in a while, actually. It's a little bit refreshing. But Aegislash is kind of a cool Pokemon. I feel like it's one of those things that, really, really fell off during this generation. Because I know that Aegislash used to be something that people were like, man, we're really getting to a point where we're just commonly allowing Aegislash now. And then it's Aegislash is a really good Pokemon. I can kind of see why it's allowed. To Aegislash barely goes around 1 anymore, to now it's even just somewhat getting the Melmetal treatment and very 50-50 getting drafted, and it's seeing it round 1, I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit refreshing. Not that I think it's a super mandatory round 1 pick, it's just a little bit refreshing. But this is a very versatile Steel type. Ghost Steel also is a really good typing offensively, actually. It's one of those things that you usually draft a defensive Steel, but Steel's still really good for taking advantage of opposing fairies, which are running rampant. I mean, everyone pretty much mandatorily grabs a fairy, so having a really good offensive response that isn't going to necessarily be soft-walled is really nice, especially when a lot of Steels as well can get like lure buried. Aegislash is a very difficult one to lure bury because you can get stuff like Spec Steel Beam or Swords Dance Iron Head or even just Swords Dance Gyro Ball, depending on the fairy. So that is definitely pretty useful in my opinion. Top out as well, it's a really good priority user with Sneak. It's probably one of the best upper tier priority users in my opinion. Besides like Sucker Punch or Urshifu, it's really the only one that I can think of that's definitively better in this sort of group of points. So I think that Aegislash as well just gives a lot to the early point of this team. It's one of those Pokemon that's similar to Zapdos. Well, I don't think it had to go round 1. It makes it so it's pretty hard to fuck up the round 2 pick.
Oh, for sure.
They're
really easy to draft around it.
Yeah, there's a better round 1 pick that the Dr. Slacking got later on, and I don't know how he did it, but I'm looking forward to seeing the synergy that he goes for with this.
Thank you for stopping in, Terrence. Have a good day at class. I appreciate you. Next up, though, we have Tony grabbing a round 1 Necrozma. Some people would say Necrozma's not a round 1 pick. I would laugh at them because I love Necrozma. I think it's great. Really, really good in a versatile builder's hand. I think when you use Necrozma outside of being like Autotomized Sweeper or Dragon Dance Sweeper, and you really look into, whether it be Calm Mind, Autotomized Dragon Dance, Meteor Beam sets are great, fat Stealth Rocking sets, or even, I love like fat Toxicking Necrozma, just like Photon, Heat Wave, or Earth Power, Moonlight, Toxic, really, really fat, annoying wall. Or Swords Dance, I think is a really, really slept on option for Necrozma, really letting it punch through fat teams and really bully them. Prism Armor is a great ability, allowing it to, lower the damage that it's taking from those super effective moves, really either helping weakness policy sets or really just helping it to check things defensively, which I think is really, really great. Great bulk, great offenses in both sides, and great coverage overall. I don't think you can really go wrong with Necro. Now, this is a late round 1 pick, so I think it's great. Now, I'm not going to say draft Necro pick 5, but I think if you're at the back end of round 1, it's a really safe Pokemon to draft because I feel like it's, pretty easy to draft around it and get things that complement it very well later on. So, good on you, Tony. I love me some round 1 Necro. Some people say it's a little bit early, but I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Next up, we have Joe DeFlamin and Tapu Koko.
Now, I'm gonna be honest. I'm really, really, really happy the Tapu Koko went. At this point in the draft, I was a little bit worried it wasn't gonna go round 1. I'm not gonna lie. But Koko is really amazing. It's one of those Pokemon I think that is like, honestly, this is one of those like mandatory round 1 Pokemon, and I'm a little bit upset that it took this long to go. Koko is one of, in my opinion, the most versatile Pokemon, just in general for as far as offensive threats go. It's a really good Calm Mind Sweeper. Obviously, it's a really good Specs user, even a Scarf user. It's one of those Pokemon like Dragapult. It's able to outpace certain Weather Sweepers, especially when they don't respect Koko's speed tier. Because while Pult, to be fair, can just outright outpace them, most aren't going to just run Timid for the Scarf Koko creep. You're not going to see Kingdra running Timid and creeping that typically unless they really expect it to come. So Koko definitely does still get that versatility game with its speed tier at 130. Also, this is a Pokemon that can actually really deceptively bulky too because of that. A lot of people don't expect really bulky Kokos or like just defensive Kokos outright even. At times, they'll usually go to if they're looking for the fast like setup option that's going to be more tanky because Zera will have stuff like Taunt, but Koko can still definitely go with like a sub-toxic set too, and again, sort of run wild, especially if it needs to even just solve its own terrain against opposing electrics. It's really good at doing that. If it wants to take advantage of it then later on for itself when the opposing electric dies, it still has that to boost its stats, which is definitely an advantage that it has over Zera, because Zera doesn't just have that ability to boost its damage output, whereas Koko does. And it can turn it on and off if it wants to, basically, because of that. So, honestly, I really do like Koko here. Yeah. Let's see what the next pick is.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Next up, we have D-Ray picking up Hydreigon round 1. Bit early for Hydreigon in my personal opinion, but it's still a phenomenal Pokemon. Getting access to Nasty Plot and Dragon Dance, really opening up its arsenal as a setup sweeper this gen, but it's a great wall breaker. It's a great Scarfer. It's great with Specs and Life Orb. It gets Taunt, so it's a great stall breaking set. I love Life Orb, Taunt, Hydreigon. Really does bully down fat teams. It can go mixed or physical. It gets cool options like Superpower from the physical side, which I think is really cool for fatter, more annoying builds with, really fat, bulky normals and things like that, which is great. Dracos and Superpowers really just raining down. It can U-turn from momentum. It can defog. It can function in a really bulky role a lot of the times as well, which I think is really important to note as well. Hydra isn't just going to be Scarf for, Specs, Life Orb, and things like that. I've seen really fat Hydras put in a lot of work with lefties and, U-turn and things like that. So I think that's really, really solid. A bit early for it, but I think if he pairs it with the right Pokemon, he's going to have a great time with Hydra here. It's definitely a D-Ray Mon as well. So very good to see here from D-Ray. Next up, we have Celesteela with the last pick of round 1. What do you think about Celly?
Celesteela is honestly a really good defensive steel type, and I know I've been saying this literally every pick, but honestly, this is just random luck, to be honest, it's happened like this. It's one of those really versatile Pokemon. Truthfully, though, I do think Celly of the Pokemon is actually the most. This is a free weakness policy abuser, and especially this generation with Meteor Beam, this is able to actually pop its Beast Boost extremely effortlessly, because you just throw on a Meteor Beam, get your +1 off, you'll most likely claim a KO with that, if not on the follow-up turn, and then bam, you'll have the coverage options with stuff like Flamethrower, Aegislash, Flash Cannon to start mauling through with an Autotomized set. Or again, weakness policy if you want to go with the physical variants. But Celesteela also does have obviously stuff like Sub-Leech. It's just a really good typing defensively, so this is probably one of the best picks this round, I think, for the pick it went in terms of draft spot, in my opinion. If not, maybe the pick 2 Dragapult, but it's definitely one of those, or your pick 10 Chomp, I would say.
Oh, for sure. We need to get Celesteela Roost, though, so it could be super broken. Go pick 1 or banned.
Oh, no. Banned at that point.
All right, you want to go with Pat Mac's round 2 pick? Double it up?
Yeah, of course. So, speaking of Pat Mac, we do have Lando-I. Now, Owen and I are going to be covering the wheels to our same picks just to not change up the coaches. Otherwise, we'd be talking about our own drafts. But Lando-I on the follow-up, this is one of those ones that I think is really fine to dual flying, in my opinion, with Lando-I. Considering Lando-I is not really a flying type. It is just a ground type that happens to be immune to opposing Earthquake. But it's not really a flying type. Celesteela is, though, with its Aegislash combination, obviously. And not only this, but Lando is immune to electric attacks for Lando. And Celesteela is at least neutral to ice for Lando. So, and also Celly's, despite being neutral, it still will take on most ice hits unless it's like a G-Darm going for Crash or something. So this combination is honestly really terrifying. This gives Pat Mac a really good breaker, as well as a really good rock setter, because Celly, being a steel type without rocks, is a little bit annoying. It's really good momentum into Celly. So I do think that this is actually a really terrifying core, and I'm really upset that Pat Mac actually managed to get it.
Oh, at the wheel, too. How's it going, Hayes? Yeah. How's it going, what do you call Dash and Sceptile? Hope you guys are doing good. Next up, we have the new Titan of the format, not Dragapult. We have G-Slowking, the most broken mon of all time. But all jokes aside, it's actually really, really solid. I'm slowly starting to see the light on this thing. This thing with a Regenerator and an Assault Vest, or even a Fizz-Def variant spread with like a Resist Berry and like Nasty Plot or Calm Mind is an absolute demon to deal with. This thing is just a great catch-all glue check to really, it feels like 90% of the format. It really does force very, very specific prep, different mixed attackers, things like that. It's really hard to pivot around, especially with Sludge Bomb and Scald spreading status and things like that. Future Sight's doing delayed damage and things like that as well to opposing teams. Nasty Plot sets, like I said, are very terrifying. Calm Mind sets that get Slack off for recovery. And obviously Regenerate is just the best ability in the game. So I think DRA picked up a great Pokemon here. And it's a phenomenal, phenomenal Fairy Resist for Hydreigon. Checking, I can't think of a Fairy in Galar Dex format that does not get beaten by G-Slowking, at least off the top of my head. Maybe some Megas in the Nat Dex format, but not in this format at the very least. So I think this is a great, great pickup here by D-Ray. Next up, though, we have Big Victini from Joe DeFlamin. Great pickup. What do you think about it?
I'll be honest, I don't like that Joe picked this, and it's not that I felt like I was sniped. No. This is not one of those instances. I do think there was a definitively better option at this point. A couple things, actually, I think that would have fit better with Coco. Stuff like, for example, Latios was still around at this point, and Latios Coco is filthy. Even still, I know this is like a little bit more of a underwhelming Pokemon for a pick 2 at this point, but something like a Scizor could have also been really good here with Coco. The momentum core that offers is insane, and it gives 2 really good options, 2 really good defoggers too. Not that I don't think that Victini is a good Pokemon. I'm not really sold on Victini Coco though, personally, though I can't deny this is a phenomenal breaker for Joe though, and it's a really versatile one at that. And it can take advantage of boots really easily too this generation to make itself not just hazard weak like it was in the past. So it still is a good pick. I'm just really not as sold on it as I used to be, especially not with Coco is all. But I mean, hey, Joe does have a really easy to pilot team so far. This is a really hard team to fuck up offensively.
Oh, for sure. And it does, Coco does punish a lot of those fat waters, and then Victini's going to punish those fat grasses that switch in and stuff like that. Yeah. Common denominator in ground types is a bit unfortunate, but, you know, the offensive synergy is still definitely there. Just eventually there's a little. It still
definitely has synergy. It just, I do think there's better picks as well at this point.
For sure. Next up, we have Tony grabbing a pick 2 Weavile. It's really, really great with Necrozma having a good, strong offensive dark type. I think I've used Necro Weavile before. It's a pretty common core when you draft Necro. This thing being incredibly fast with a speed stat of above 120, which is phenomenal. Obviously, losing Pursuit is unfortunate, but having options like Triple Axle this gen to really just break through so many fat teams is going to be really awesome. If you're aggressive enough, you can find an opportunity to Swords Dance, but most of the time you're going to be running Life Orb or Band and just clicking a button. You get Ice Shard for priority, you get Low Kick for really fat steals that want to switch in on your Ice Stab, which is great. You're a little bit Helmet fodder, so you got to be careful about Helmet, but otherwise you're going to be in a good spot. Boots is a nice niche option in a matchup where you feel you can get an SD off. It's great to keep yourself at full, because Weavile can live some, neutral hits from full, which I think is really important. But it's going to spread knockoffs, it's going to Icicle Crash and Triple Axle, it's going to Ice Shard pick things off, and just be a really solid offensive pairing with Necrozma here. Next up, we have the Latios. What do you think about Slack getting the Aegislash in the backwards order?
Yeah, no, as I said, he did get it backwards. Won round 2. Aegis is one of those Pokemon that could have easily went round 2. And Lottie's easily a Pokemon that should have went round 1, like early round 1 in my opinion. I do think that Lottie is one of it. Like, I'll just say it right now, Lottie was the best thing to go this round for when it went. It was truly criminal it went this late into round 2, let alone round 2 at all. I'm really shocked that it didn't go to the Koko team. A little surprised it didn't go to the Selly or Lando pair with Patmac, but to be fair, I won't lie, Selly and Lando is still a really gross combination in itself, so less shade to that one. But I'm still just shocked as well that this just didn't go round 1. But I do hate that Slocking got it. Now, to be fair, there's still some things that can be exploited with this. For example, a really strong Ghost can break this. But
a strong Dark type, yeah.
Yeah, a strong Dark as well. But in terms of Ghosts, at least, Dr. Slacking already did take one off the board with Ag, so it's really just stuff like Gengar and Dragapult that need to be truly worried about here, in my opinion, unless it's someone actually gets Spectrier. And as far as Darks, I mean, it's kind of unavoidable, but to be fair, there's some really good Dark checks still on the board, and it's only round 2. So the 2 weaknesses that these double up on aren't really a huge deal for how much of a presence they will just bring to a matchup.
Oh, for sure. Offensively, this is disgusting, so I agree, 100%. Next up, we have another phenomenal Pokemon here, Liv taking Kyurem. This Pokemon, talk about a glow up this generation. It getting Boots, Freeze Dry, DD, and Icicle Spear all as great tools and options. This thing is great with pressure, just sub-pressure stalling everything out. I've seen absolutely demonic Kyurem sets stalling out steel types out of all of their moves to hit it, basically, by just sub and roosting, because this thing's phenomenal bulk. 95 is a solid speed tier to have and knock off the board right here for Liv as well. Like I said, reliable recovery and roost. It can set up offensively, or it can just be specs and rain down Freeze Dries and Dracos on the opposing team and be an absolute pain to deal with. It also has Earth Power for fat steals, which is really important, and even Body Press is a cool little niche coverage option if you're playing a random Tyranitar or something like that, which I think is a really solid option as well. But yeah, just a great Pokemon, and it really is a Pokemon that's really well, if in the hands of a right builder, can push past its own traditional checks really easy and exert a ridiculous amount of pressure in each matchup. So I think this is a great pickup by Liv. Next up, we have my pick, Heatran.
Yes, so Garchomp Heatran in general is a really good option. Heatran's one of the best Steel Switchins you can get, considering it's 4 times resistant. Well, one of the best Fairy Switchins, I should say, considering it's 4 times resistance to Fairy. To be fair, credit where due, I do think this is a little bit early for Heatran, but I can't lie, this is still a really amazing partnership. Heatran is one of those Pokemon that I think has a really high skill ceiling and is a little bit underexplored in draft format, in terms of at least when it goes, like, it's typically one of those Pokemon that'll either just go undrafted or it'll maybe go like round 4 or 5. So I do think that it is still worth a pick 2, but I do think it would have been around like round 3 or 4 if Owen did want it to. Now, to be fair, this does give Owen a lot already that he has checked off his team. If you're drafting off of a checklist, Owen has already gotten 2 Stealth Rockers, 2 portions to a Steel Dragon Fairy Core, which, while not the most mandatory, it is still good to at least sort of hit those sort of check marks. On top of that as well, Owen already has some really good speed tiers, 2 amazing Scarfers, 2 really good breakers if necessary, with SD Chomp or even just like a Specs Heatran. On top of this, Owen has an amazing Stall Breaker if there's, let's say, some really fat Fairy that wants to wild Garchomp. So the synergy these two do provide each other is really low-key just broken for Owen, and it opens up a ton later on. So while I do think it's a little bit early for Heatran, this is already a really disgusting start that he has to a team.
Woo! Next up, we have Ferrothorn. I want to talk about some annoying steel types. We had Heatran Goat and then Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn's a little bit different, not as potent offensively, but it's going to set up spikes and rocks for that Zeraora and be an absolute nuisance. Now, it is a bit tough to have a grass type that doesn't resist ground when you have a Zeraora, but otherwise, it does complement it very well. And to be completely honest, Ferros are going to avoid those 2-hit KOs from those ground types anyway, so it's not the biggest deal in the world that you don't, immediately, like, in a technical sense, resist ground, because Pharaoh almost resists everything besides fire. But really, really solid Pokemon outside of that 4 times resistance or 4 times weakness to fire, and even then, a lot of non-stab, options, non-boosting item options aren't going to OQ you from full. It can spread knockoffs, it can spread thunder waves, it can body press through things, which was a great tool that it got this generation. It's honestly one of the best hazard stacking mons. I think if you want to go for a hazard stacking approach, Ferrothorn is one of the best options in the sense that it really does force in those Pokemon. They're going to be, the defoggers or the mons with boots and gets big knockoffs off on them, which is great. It can leech to keep itself healthy. I've even seen cursed Ferrothorns put in a lot of work. It's a really simple Pokemon though, and it does what it does really well, and I think it'll do really solid here with Zeraora. I definitely think this is a great pickup with the in conjunction with that. Next up though, we have Scizor here for Aquarius. What do you think about Scizor?
So, I mentioned earlier, this is one of those Pokemon I think that while it typically isn't exactly an early round 2 pick, or even just a round 2 pick typically in Galar, it is one of those really deceptively strong Pokemon. Scizor obviously being an amazing pivot, it's a really good defog option. It's only got 1 weakness too, so if Aquarius is going for that pseudo rain team, she's already doing a really good job at building that out with the Zapdos Scizor core. On top of this as well, this is one of those really annoying Voltorb combinations that is near impossible to actually try and pivot like more aggressively than, considering Scizor is a really good slow pivot and Zapdos is one of those really good mid-speed pivots. So this can typically out-pivot a majority of drafts if it really wanted to. It's 2 really good defog options, a really good physical option with Scizor, and a really good special one with Zapdos if Aquarius is going for a more offensive team. And defensively speaking, these also do a good job at checking each other as long as there is that good rain option, in my opinion, or even just, if not a rain option, just a really good switch into fire later on, because Zapdos isn't going to necessarily switch in on fire, but they still do offer a lot, because Scizor still will kill the ice types, at least for Zapdos, and it's still at least neutral to rock and able to revenge a lot of good rocks. So I still do think that this is a really good option for a start to a team. And it really does give a ton of options to Aquarius for later on, so I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of this team later on.
Oh, for sure. Before I jump on to the next pick, I do really quick want to plug the NCP server. If you guys haven't joined the server, definitely join up. You can get roles to, see these coaches upload when they go live and get notified. You can participate in pick'ems. We also have a showdown division that we have live games going up for throughout the week as well, and that's going to be a Pokemon Legends Arceus League with cool mons like Ursaluna and stuff like that. So if you want to watch fun games like that, definitely check out the NCP server. And yeah, drop a like if you guys haven't already and you guys are enjoying the stream. I'd appreciate it a ton. But next up,
very sponsored.
Woohoo! We have next up in Slowbro for Keegan here. Regenerator button. I love to see it. We obviously see the Tornadus-T go on and then the Slowbro go too. A great Phys Def check. Really kind of starting to build a very solid defensive core and getting the Slowbro here. It teleports around for free and grabs really, really great momentum. So another solid momentum core even with the Tornadus. It throws out Scalds and Toxics and burns things. It got Body Press this gen. Has great Gen 1 coverage with like Flamethrower and Ice Beam and all that fun stuff, which is great. It can Calm Mind up. I believe it can also Nasty Plot up, which I think is a really slept-on aspect of Slowbro, getting that immediate boost in special attack. If you don't really care about that Speed F boost, to really exert a lot more pressure is great. You can Future Sight, and like I said, you can teleport around and get that regen back. You can even set up Trick Room for some slower members later if he does end up going that route. So I love Slowbro. It's a great catch-all check to everything physical in the game, and that and Torn is going to be hard to break, especially in conjunction if he does, kind of elect to continue with getting that regenerative core type of stuff. Welcome to Stream Kakashi, how you doing? All right, next we have part 2 of Guess Amel's theme. We have a Lapras from Amel.
So, I'll unironically say this was a smart pick right now for what Amel is going for, I should say. Like keep in mind, when I do discuss Amel's picks, I'm just going to be talking about them in the context of Amel's deceptively clever mind. I'm trying to be kind. I'm really trying to be kind here. But like, I'm going to be talking about these contextualized to what Amel is doing. So, I think it works for what he's going for. He's obviously, you know, the water immunity is really nice for Entei, at least, if nothing else. Lapras is also one of those like really good budget Pokemon, if nothing else, for 4 points. It's pretty underexplored in draft, in my opinion. I'm also just a huge Lapras fan, so I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna simp this a little more than Entei at least. Do I think that Amel's team is broken right now? Yeah,
Yes.
Amel is the best draft, inherently.
100%. Well, round 2 Lapras is kind of nuts.
Yeah,
So
it's one of those things that, like, you know, if you play Amel, I do think that your smart bet is to just get the forfeit win, because at least you won't get 6-0'd. So, just giving you guys some heads up right now, Amel will probably not be uploading a lot of his games because he'll be getting 6 or 7 forfeit wins this season.
100%. Dude, I am so glad I don't play Amel. I would be terrified to lose to this
I
game.
play him with 4.
I'm so excited.
scared.
Because there's so little downside for him if he loses, because like he's using the round 2 Lapras team, bro. It's fine. Like if he loses, it's whatever. But if you lose to the round 2 Lapras team, your reputation as a draft league player is gone forever. I'm so happy I don't play him, and I don't want to play him if he ends up making playoffs. And I think looking at Amel's schedule, he could realistically maybe sneak into playoffs as a low seed, even with the draft that he has and his theme. So I'm really excited to watch him this season. Definitely go check out Amel. Is it Skaroopies?
I am.
Go check out his channel, because they're gonna. Oh, for sure.
If I lose, it's gone.
100%. That's terrifying. So whoever plays Amel, I'm so sorry for you. I feel really bad because that's a lot of pressure. I won't lie. Next up, we have Rillaboom. Back to a little bit more of a standard pick here. Kurt getting the round 2 Rillaboom. It's a bit weird because it's not necessarily like, you know, prototypical Mew partner. But like I said, I don't think you need to draft in that way with Mew. I think just getting good Pokemon, drafting a good, sound, functioning team, and then having a Mew is the best way to function with this Pokemon. And I love Rillaboom. Banded sets obviously exert a ton of pressure. Even on the switch-ins, the Telegraph switch-ins, like Fire types and Flying types in particular, you force those in, and they're such Telegraph switch-ins that if you catch them with a knockoff and they lose their boots, they damn near die to a Wood Hammer, a banded Wood Hammer after rocks. Like, I know Max HP Torn, if it loses its boots and rocks are up, it just dies to Adam and Wood Hammer. So, like, this Pokemon can really push past a lot of checks, grab great momentum, has great coverage. It can also Swords Dance as well. It can bulk up as well. It can taunt against Leech Seed, so like Taunt Leech Seed is actually a pretty solid set. I've seen Grassy Glide knock off Taunt Leech Seed, do a lot of work in a lot of matchups as well. And it can be AV as well. AV Rillaboom was one of my favorite sets to run in SVU. I think it's a really solid sponge and pivot, and great U-turn grab, momentum grabber, and things like that. So I think Kurt's gonna really like Rillaboom. I think he used it before once in a Showdown League SPS and did really, really well with it. So I'm sure he'll do well with it here this season, depending on what he ends up grabbing in the future. Next up, we have a round 2 Chandelure. Before we jump into this, I do want to mention the reason this is round 2 is because Jesse made a lot of post-draft transactions, and just the way the transactions dropped, and ended up putting Chandelure as his second overall pick, I suppose, because there was a grace period. So he didn't draft Chandelure round 2. I believe this was actually originally a Slowking. So just keep that in mind that he didn't draft this round 2, but you can still talk about the synergy and things like that, or at least what Chandelure does. The team will make more sense as he goes along.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Jesse ended up actually getting a much more round 2 worthy Pokemon, and I almost did swap the order, but I figured it would be a bit misleading, because it does actually go into a couple other coaches' picks later on. So because of that, Chandelure was the one that because I was actually the one that did his slides.
Oh yeah,
so Chandelure is the one I still put here. I figured it just made more sense to how the draft actually progressed. So it's a little bit weird, obviously, you know, looking at Chandelure here, but it does actually, I mean, in general, to Jesse's team, it does give him a lot. It gives him a really good fire switch in, which is one of the few ways to take on Zamazenta like really well, especially because a lot of fires are special. So having an immunity actually is really useful. On top of this as well, Chandelure is just a really good special breaker, something that obviously Zamazenta can't necessarily do for itself. So this is really good for Jesse's team. Also, it's a really good Scarf Pokemon for Jesse, considering obviously Zama can't really perform at that speed tier. If it has to deal with something like a web set, Chandelure can at least avoid them, and unironically will be faster than Zamazenta at that point. So I do think that Chandelure actually does offer a lot. Boots can help it a ton, and for 11 points, this is actually a really cool Pokemon to Jesse's team. It's a little bit hard to obviously, you know, go over a round 2 Chandelure, but I think that it's one of those things that will truthfully, it'll make itself fit a lot better on the team once we get into like round 4 and 5. Just kind of something we'll have to wait and see on, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it was Slowking because nothing else fears for Zamazenta. You're 100% right, Jesse. Next up, we have a phenomenal pairing with T-Rail right here in Urshifu Gengar. Again, I just won a championship with this offensive core, and it really is as disgusting as you think it is. Urshifu just clicks U-turn, Gengar comes in, and it clicks a fucking button. Or Gengar breaks through the things that Urshifu can't deal with, like those fairies. That's actually just it. And kills them, and then Urshifu comes in and clicks Close Combat and Wicked Blow. Urshifu also breaks through the things that Gengar doesn't necessarily appreciate in Normals and Darks. Now, Gengar can push through those with Focus Blast and Dazzling Gleams and things like that, but it's great to have an option to more reliably do so if you want to. Gengar's a great special breaker, great 110 speed tier as well. So 98 and 110 is going to be a great, I think it's 98, no, it's 97. Hydreigon's 98. I think, I don't know. It's 97 or 98 for Urshifu though, but regardless, it plus Gengar is a good speed tier jump, and these two Pokemon offensively are phenomenal together, so I think T-Rail is going to have a great time using these two. It really doesn't take too much to make these two succeed together. They're definitely great. Next up, we have Togekiss with Dragapult.
So, honestly, I do think that Togekiss in general isn't one of those, like, super round 2 Pokemon, but at the same time, though, for back-end round 2, it's a pretty good Pokemon. It's one of my favorite draft cores, Dragapult, Togekiss, Heatran. I'm really glad that Hayes was able to at least get 2 of those Pokemon, since obviously, you know, the best fairy, Clefairy, was taken. But yeah, I guess, you know what? Gotta give you credit. Maybe Heatran wasn't gonna get to you round 3. Because this core is just, it's too broken of a Dragon Steel Fairy core.
100%.
In general, though, Togekiss is one of those really good options for Dragapult, though. It's really good just to have 2 immunities, and one of those, especially being to opposing dragon types, is actually really helpful. It's really good at, obviously, being another momentum user, which a lot of people, I feel like, forget, but Togekiss can always just click Dry Baton Pass and switch into another Pokemon. Especially with that slow speed tier, it could even potentially bring in Dragapult successfully. It's a really good Scarf option, able to actually help be another option to just creep Pokemon that would outpace Dragapult barely. So, in general, I do like Togekiss, especially with the speed support with T-Wave. If maybe it doesn't want to lock into a Scarf, it could still offer control for speed that way. So, I do think Togekiss offers a lot. It's a little early. I mean, typically I would say it's round 2 early, but for basically end of round 2, I think it actually kind of fits. So,
oh yeah,
good job,
he's pretty close to the wheel, so he'll be fine.
Yeah, it's basically a round 3 pick.
Next up, though, we have Jirachi for Sally Mumble. There's going to be a pretty clumpy speed tier combination here in Landorus and Jirachi, but it's so early in the draft that that's not really necessarily a terrible thing, provided he patches it up later. It does give him a solid Ice Resist, which is definitely really important with Landorus. They do both struggle with bulky water, so that's something to keep in mind for him going forward. But again, these are all early round things that he can definitely patch. Jirachi, a really versatile Pokemon, whether it be that, prototypical Scarf set, or if it be T-Wave or Body Slam Jirachi to bait pairs and Serene Grace things down, flinch them down, or if it be Calm Mind variants or Wish Protect variants and things like that. It gets U-turn for momentum. It's another Rocker, which is also really, really important, and a good Spadef wall in a lot of matchups with its Psychic and Steel typing being really, really solid in a lot of instances with that. So, Jirachi is a very solid Pokemon. It's not necessarily what I would think, like, what to immediately pair with Landorus, I won't lie to you. But it's also not a terrible pairing, and I think he can, continue to patch things up, potentially going here into round 3 with his next pick in Rotom Wash. Again, giving a very, very great Ice Resist. Giving him a very solid way to beat up bulky waters, too. I actually really like Jirachi Rotom Wash a lot, and I love Landorus Incarnate plus Rotom Wash a ton, especially if you can find a great way to really punish those fat grasses, which Landorus can do a lot of time with, Life Orb, Sludge Waves, and Jirachi obviously resists them, but maybe a more offensive fire or a flying type that uses its flying stab. But regardless, Landorus Rotom Wash is a tried and true offensive core in the showdown scene. I'm sure it'll do really well for him here, grabbing great momentum, spreading status, and being a general nuisance as Rotom Wash typically is. Next up, we have Nidoking, which is a great pickup for Hayes, and a really pretty looking slide with his purple background. You want to talk about Nidoking, though?
I'm not gonna lie, I do agree with the aesthetic thing. It's weirdly enough, the purple on purple kind of works here. But in terms of Nidoking on this team, I still like Nidoking a lot. Nidoking, for one, is a really amazing killer to fairies for Dragapult, which is really, really useful in my opinion. It's one of those Pokemon, too, that, I think that Nidoking might have fit a little bit better here, just because it's a bit bulkier and more able to pull off the hazard option without just dying in a couple turns. But don't be fooled, Nidoking can definitely make that work, too. And it's a little bit more of a breaker for Hayes as well, which is still something that is very valuable for Dragapult. I just would have, personally speaking, maybe gotten that with a fighting type instead. But that's not to say that this is necessarily the wrong way of going about it, because he could definitely go for maybe the bulk in other places. Hell, he already has Togekiss for at least starting that. So I do think Nidoking actually kind of works here still. And I say kind of, but it is still just an objectively really good pick. Sheer Force helps with this Pokemon immensely with its special damage output, but it can still definitely make some physical sets work with Poison Jab and Ice Punch and stuff like that. Nidoking also having 2 hazard options for Haze, which currently he had 0, so T-Spikes and Rocks are really good already for Haze's team. And having the grounded Poison typing as well makes a little bit less of a dependency on Pulp, because it doesn't have to worry about getting Toxic Spiked to wear itself down long term. So I do actually like this a lot. I think that Haze already is starting off with a really scary draft. In my opinion, honestly, starting off with one of my favorite teams.
Oh, no, 100%. And Nidoking's also a great T-Spike, in the sense that it beats most grounded poisons really, really well. Next up, though, we have Rotom Heat, and a little bit more of a reliable Fairy resist for Tiro, so I really like this option a lot. Gengar obviously does resist Fairy, but it didn't really want to pivot in on them, and Rotom can do so a lot more easily. Really, really good momentum grabber and Volt Switch, because a lot of grounds don't want to either take a Will-O-Wisp or an Overheat to the face, which I think is really, really valuable, as well as being the fact that it is immune to ground with that Levitate ability, obviously. So Fire plus Electric with Levitate and Boots is actually really solid defensively this gen. I love Rotom Heat. It can also Nasty Plot. It can Screens like all the other Rotoms as well. It can spread a bunch of stats like Will-O-Wisp, Thunder Wave, and Toxic, which is a really valuable trait to have in a Pokemon. Not a lot of Pokemon can do all 3 of those, which I think is a really big added bonus to all the Rotom forms, which is great. And yeah, just an overall great Pokemon and great pair to the Urshifu Gengar, and being a good Fairy pivot and being able to Volt Switch around really, really freely. So next up, we have Thundurus for Jesse.
Thundurus, is one of those Pokemon, as I said, that once we start getting later into picks, it'll make a bit more sense with the Chandelure pick for Jesse's team. Thundurus offers a ton of really strong options to this team. For one, the Prankster T-Wave is honestly really great speed control for both Zamazenta and also Chandelure here, more importantly, because it allows for both to honestly do a lot more offensive work. On top of this as well, we have the option for Thundurus to honestly be a really good setup option with stuff like Bulk Up and take advantage of maybe Defiant, which is really useful this generation as maybe an option to bluff a special set, but then go for a sweep with Physical, which could be really good to try and pick up Zama in that physical front. So Thundurus already being a really good versatile offensive option for both special and physical is really appreciated in my opinion. The speed over 110 is insane, especially with an option that can actually run Boots, and even without Boots, still get around webs in general. So I do think Thundurus actually is a really good pickup here. It's also Prankster Defog to help in a last-ditch effort to maybe clear spikes for Zama if Zama ends up being a win con. So in general, I think that Jesse already has a really strong start in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. So I have to ask, since you stream on YouTube much more than I do, is that a new meta? Is that like a new thing where bots with random names just type text? It's making me die laughing because everybody just keeps typing text after him. We've gotten a fair few of them. It's hella funny.
They don't usually type more than once if it's a bot.
Free interaction. One of them did it twice within a few seconds, but it's mostly been different ones.
It's usually just one message and done.
Yeah, just don't click on their channel, everybody. But next up, we have Zygarde from Kurt. And Mew Rillaboom Zygarde is a pretty nuts start, in my opinion. I actually really like this start from Kurt. Rillaboom Zygarde being an awesome core, really making Zygarde an absolute demon to deal with. Like, subtoxic Zygardes in the middle of grassy terrain is so painstakingly annoying. There's another text. But being a great coil sweeper, great Dragon Dance sweeper, it can throw off glares and toxics. Like I said, it has priority and extreme speed. It has those matchups where it can go offensive with Band or Dragon Dance, but a lot of the time Zygarde's bread and butter shit is going to be fat coil sets, fat subtoxic variants, and just a big general nuisance to a lot of teams. I love Zygarde. It's one of my all-time kill leaders. I think it has my best KD all time. So I love this Pokemon. I know how to use it successfully, and I know Kurt's going to use it successfully as well, knowing the kind of player that he is and the way he likes to formulate his teams and his matchups. So I think he'll do very, very solidly with Zygarde here. Next up, though, we have Drapion for Amel.
Oh, I'm not gonna lie. I do actually think that this is the best Pokemon that Amel got personally. Especially for cost, being a really strong 10-point Pokemon. Drapion does offer a lot to Amel's team, unironically. For one, it's only one weakness, which, while it is doubling up with Entei on that one weakness so far to ground, this isn't exactly a type that is being grounded. It's not a type that's really hard to get a resist to later on for Amel. On top of that as well, Drapion being able to actually give Amel his first hazard being T-Spikes is really good because if nothing else, Amel could maybe try and just cheese the T-Spike chip in and then go for a win with something like an Entei or a Lapras. So Amel, unironically, is at least getting some form of competence to his team despite going for highest budget Entei at the current moment. Now, in terms of the theme, I would be shocked if anyone could still guess the theme at this point.
No,
in fact, I think
no
if anything, I think Amel made it harder to guess at this point.
100%.
But I'm looking forward to seeing what the guesses end up being, especially once it gets to like the round 5-6 picks.
Oh yeah, for sure. Keep those guesses coming. What is Amel's draft theme? I'm sure. I don't think anybody. Are you allowed to have multiple guesses for Amel's thing? You can have as many guesses as you want. That's how confident I am. You are not going to.
It'll take 100 for anyone to maybe guess it. Like 100 from every person, I would say.
Oh yeah. Now, next up, we have more momentum with Keegan here, grabbing Cinderace. Phenomenal Pokemon. One of my favorite Pokemon to draft in Gen 8, despite its terrible, abhorrent, ugly design. Really great Pokemon. Just clicks U-turn the entire game with boosts. This thing is an absolute pain to deal with and chip down and put in range of the rest of your team. Faster things are obviously going to revenge it, but, obviously we can switch right out, and it's going to U-turn out on everything slower that it doesn't beat already. Pyro Ball and High Jump Kick are great offensive options. It also gets Gunk Shot, so it has a lot of really high base power offensive moves, really making it that much more potent offensively, which I think is really, really important. Obviously, this is not Libero, so it's not going to be getting stabbed on those U-turns, which is good. Round 3 Libero Ace would be pretty crazy, but great Pokemon regardless, and going to be really solid in this team. It doesn't have Regenerator though, so I'm going to have to give it a 3 out of 10 on this pick. It is not 10 points and below. 6-letter names except Drapion. Okay, that's not really a theme there, that has processed, but hey, these are creative guesses, and I love it.
It kind of is. I'll give it that. It just doesn't work with Drapion.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He said 6-letter names except for the 3rd pick out of 3. All right, next up we have Aquarius and Latias. You want to talk about Aquarius' pick?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for one, this is the fire resist we were talking about earlier, and while it's the second ice weakness on the team already, especially for Pokemon that are pretty common to matchups like Lottie and Zapdos, at the same time though, this ends up being, if nothing else, a still really strong partner, and Scizor can still definitely break the ice types really well that the weaknesses are starting to actually double up on. On top of it, this is still a 3rd momentum option considering the Baton Pass edition for Latias this gen, so the momentum is honestly just really coming in with this team. Not only this, but it's the first Pokemon above 110 here, so I am definitely at least really glad that Aquarius is really pursuing the speed front, because it looked like his team could have maybe ended up functioning on the slower end, but this will at least help pressure at least some faster Pokemon like Torn, forcing him to run plus speed natures for Lottie just to make sure that it can outpace and not get Dracoed on. So Aquarius already has a really strong start to their team in my opinion, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of it.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Reuniclus, starting a pretty scary defensive core here in the Ferrothorn Reuniclus. Reuniclus resisting those fighting type moves that Ferrothorn does not appreciate, which is definitely really, really nice. And this Pokemon can just pick up and win matchups on its own, to be completely honest, with Calm Mind, Acid Armor sets, really punching teams that don't have dark types, or just having access to Focus Blast to push through them anyways. With a Colbur Berry, or even without a Colbur Berry, to be completely honest, this Pokemon is going to chew pretty much any with one hit from most knockoffs and really be able to nuke those Pokemon back. It's great with a Life Orb with Magic Garb, not taking that recoil, as well as, getting that nice power boost. It also has access to Regenerator, the most broken ability in the game, though typically you're not going to be running it as much. I think AV Reuniclus is also a great option with regen, though, so that's something else to keep in mind. An offensive Trick Room Reuniclus is also really solid and tough to deal with Psychic, Shadow Ball, Focus Blast, really covering most teams neutrally or super effectively this generation. It can be an absolute demon to deal with, especially with a Life Orb and that Magic Guard and things like that. So this is a great pickup, and the start of what I assume to be a pretty potent defensive core here for Kaz. Next up, we have my next pick in Sylveon. You want to talk about Sylph?
Yeah, sure. So Sylveon already offers Owen a really good Wish Passer, actually, which is really appreciated with stuff like Heatran and more importantly Heatran, but also for Garchomp too. It's Owen's first momentum option on the team, actually, which is definitely really appreciated when giving a free option to bring in Garchomp and allow it to click a free Banded Earthquake or Swords Dance or really whatever it wants to click, because it's Garchomp. It controls the field. Not only this, but Owen, as I said, while it's not a mandatory core to draft, Owen did already get some really good synergy with that broken Fairy Dragon Steel Core.
It's required. Why would I not?
It's mandatory. Owen would get kicked from the league if he didn't draft it. But in general, though, I mean, Sylveon does definitely give a lot to Garchomp, in my opinion, and this is one of those Pokemon I think that definitely gets a little bit overlooked in draft. considering the fact that I feel like Sylveon's just a Pokemon that usually gets looked over, but it's really good bulky, and it's one of those Pokemon that even without investment will still put up a lot of an offensive pressure thanks to Pixelate Hyper Voice. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with this season.
Oh, for sure. Oh goodness, this particular bot has gone 3 times in a row. I can't. Yeah. Oh my goodness, they're about it. Next up, we have Liv's next pick in Buzzwole. Really defensive, annoying beast. This thing having a ridiculous defense stat and really checking pretty much any physical attack really well. Like yesterday I watched an Ultra Sun and Moon game between Kurt and John where Kurt's Buzzwole could very comfortably live a Zen Headbutt from Mega Medicham. And I think that's really disgusting that it just resists Psychic. Yeah, it could very comfortably live it, and Psyshock from Slowbro was doing 20%. It was roosting on it the entire game, which I think is really gross. This thing can obviously get that big defense boost with Beast Boost, or it can get an attack boost if it's a more offensive variant. Getting access to close combat this gem was great for more offensive variants, being Scarf or Band sets, or even Life Orb sets being really demonic. I also think that Boots is a great option for this mon if we don't want it to get spikes chipped down so it's not put in range of those physical attackers, which is really great. So Liv really building up a pretty darn bulky team up to this point. We'll see the direction in which she wants to go from here, though. Next up, though, we have Crook-O Delay getting picked up by Dr. Slacking.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that Dr. Slacking's team really needed to go after was some sort of ghost switch in, which currently, at the very least, if nothing else, Crocodile is a phenomenal ghost switch in. While Pursuit is no longer a thing in the games, it's able to, at the very least, punish ghost types, which is still really useful. Not only that, but on top of this as well, it's still a Dark Resist, and Crocodile does still have some options to punish Dark types with stuff like Close Combat, or even just Earthquake will do a lot of damage to a majority of them. Intimidate is really good support for Dr. Slacking's team as well, because while he doesn't necessarily have some hardcore Spidef wall, Lottie at the very least is a bit more Spidef bulky, and on top of it as well, Aegislash will typically, if it's going to go defensive, be easier to invest in the special defense considering the types that it checks, stuff like Psychic and Fairy. So the Intimidate support, if nothing else, is definitely really appreciated and gives a lot more freedom to actually set up if he wants to. So I really like the core actually so far. This is a really strong team.
Oh, for sure. We have a good guess here from Bread Pudding today. Is almost named Chinese Zodiac Signs. Entei is the dog, Drapion is the snake. I don't know what that should be. That's a good guess. No, it is not. Amos theme was also not snakes because Entei is not a snake, Tiro. Or if Beardy got your account, I don't know. Regardless of who said Entei is a snake, though, you're wrong. Next up, we have Big Mel Metal here coming in next. Great way to break through the fairies that we may not particularly appreciate, because there are some that can avoid 2-hit KOs from, like, Life Orb and Banded Axe, or like Life Orb Axles, things like that. And really a great breaker. Great AV pivot. I think AV Mel Metal is the truth. Great Pokemon. Protective Paths is an option you're going to run a lot when you're running into Rocky Helmets and Flame Bodies and Statics and things like that, but it's still very solid. I think if Tony can get a good Witch Passer to keep this thing healthy, it could be really solid. He could also go with Rest Talk variants, which are also great. Toxic Protect variants with Leftovers. Acid Armor Body Press sets. So I think Melmetal is actually a lot more versatile than people give it credit for. And I think Band is actually typically one of the worst sets to bring in a lot of matchups. I think like EV or Toxic Protect sets or like Thunder Waving sets are typically a lot better, and I think if Tony can kind of recognize that, he'll succeed pretty well with this Pokemon. This is a pretty fun offensive core here that he has at the top here. But yeah, pretty good pickup by Tony. Next up, Crook Aegislash is for sure an offensive core that goes burr. Oh yeah, absolutely nuts. Next up, we have a Pokemon I really want to try in Joda Flame and picking up Dragonite.
Yeah, so Dragonite, I'm not gonna lie, I do like Dragonite a lot here actually. Dragonite Koko is one of those weird pairings, but it works. This is a really amazing ground switch in for the Koko Victini team, if nothing else, considering how well it's going to switch in on ground types, and especially with multi-scale too. Thanks to Boots' generation, it can keep them a lot more easily intact. And to be fair, this is still a bit more susceptible to teams such as Hail or Sand teams at the very least that can still get that passive chip over time. But if Joe doesn't play a team that has like a Sand Excadrill, honestly, I do think this is a pretty fine check to pretty much any other ground type that Joe would end up realistically facing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens here. This is also a really good water check to stuff like waters that might go for Skull Burns with Victini, especially with its mixed offenses. It can maybe just go for the special route if it's really thinking it might get burned. It's also just a really good grass check to potentially help with the grass types that might try and at least sponge Koko hits as a soft check to Koko. So I like the synergies actually provides here.
Oh, 100%. I think Fat D-Knight is a really, really solid defensive nuisance as well. There's things are throwing off Toxics and Thunder Waves and Heal Bells and Defog. It's just a great Pokemon. Next up, though, we have D-Ray picking up Primarina. A little bit of roll compression, grabbing his Water type and his Fairy type in one here. Really, really like this Pokemon, especially in conjunction with a good way of keeping it healthy, a good way to Wish Pass into it. So if D-Ray ends up doing that, he'll be in a good spot. But this thing's going to throw off Scalds and Moonblast, Hydro Pumps if it's specs. It's going to flip turn for momentum. It has Ice Beam for fat grasses, which is also really, really solid. And it's just overall a great Pokemon. I got access to Calm Mind in Encore this gen. Actually, I don't know if I had Encore in Gen 7. I know it didn't have Calm Mind, but
I think it had Encore.
I think it might have. But regardless, Encore is another great tool that I think is really slept on with Primarina. Encore is a great, great option in punishing either setup or hazards or any really passivity by the opponent, and then grabbing momentum into your Hydreigon, into your Slowking, or whatever other breaker you end up going with here, D-Ray. So I actually think that Prim is definitely a solid pickup here, and probably the one that fits the best, like, of the Water Fairy archetype, because Azu, as cool as it is offensively, isn't a great Fat Water or Fat Fairy, so I'm not the biggest fan of it drafting it in either one of those roles. And then Feeny, you don't want to nerf your Hydreigon, Draco Meteors, in my personal opinion. So I think Prim was definitely a very solid pickup here, and great for roll compression for D-Ray. Next up, though, we have the Sacramento Sandslash picking up Milotic.
Yes, so this is that actual Ice Gist that Pat Mac ended up going for, which honestly is really good here. Milotic is one of those Pokemon I think that got a lot better once the Crown Tundra and Isle of Armor DLCs came out, thanks to the addition of Flip Turn, giving this thing an actual momentum to keep up with Pokemon such as Slowbro and Slowking that got Teleport this generation, which in my opinion is actually really useful for it. While Marvel Scale isn't exactly the best option for Milotic, considering while it is appreciated, obviously, a lot of people fall into the trap of running just Flame Orb Milotic and taking the passive chip over time, weakening what Milotic can actually do, instead of maybe running leftovers. Yeah, especially instead of maybe running like a leftovers and just letting yourself get burned or toxic to then at least neutralize the damage you're taking. So as long as Pat Mac doesn't fall into that Flame Orb Marvel Scale set every week, I think that this could end up actually being a really worthwhile option for his team.
Oh, 100%. And then his next round is going to be Lucario. Bit of an early Lucario. What do you think about this pick?
Yeah, honestly, I do think Lucario was very early, but I do get what it offers here. This is a really versatile option, offensively speaking, for Pat Mac. It's another versatile steel, actually, funny enough, that can run both physical and special offense. So Pat Mac does have two of those, but they do very different things. This is a really good steel killer, whereas Celesteela is more so just meant to sit on steel types. Not like this, but Celesteela is an actual Fairy Switch-In, and Lucario is literally anything but a Fairy Switch-In. So they definitely do offer very different things despite being two steel types that can be offensive, and Celi also could maybe get more defensive screen time here if it wanted to. Lucario also is an amazing ice killer, so again, Pat Mac clearly did want to try as hard as possible to patch up the ice types that currently were not checked at this point in the draft. So I actually really like the pair personally. This also gives Pat Mac some really good priority options with stuff like Vacuum Wave, Bullet Punch, E-Speed. So I think there's a good pick.
Oh, for sure. I just love Celi and Milo a good pair. Would love to see Arcanine or another bulky Freeze Dry Resist for sure. Getting another Freeze Dry Resist is definitely really important because he doesn't really have one right now because Lucario doesn't really count too much. The Aquasphere says, seeing as electrics don't get HP Ice anymore, the three of these are actually really hard to break consistently. Pair these with Solid Wish user and it's almost impossible for sure. And 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely a very, very potent defensive core. At least in a way of hitting it super effectively. There are obviously neutral breakers that can break through these kinds of cores, but yeah, when it comes to just like raw, super effective type coverage, yeah, of course, it's going to be a really solid defensive core. Next up, we have Mienshao here from D-Ray, grabbing his fighting type, grabbing a Pokemon with Regenerator to pair with that Slowking. So a little bit of a regen core going. This Pokemon's a great, great pivot. 105's base speed tier is really solid for this team as well. Being able to U-turn and knock off in close combat. Life Orb Mienshao sets are also very, very scary to deal with, whether it be Swords Dance or just 4 attacks in all honesty. Being able to throw off close combat, knock off, and Stone Edge, and a bunch of cool options like that. And really just being a phenomenal pivot with an AV potentially as well. I think AV Mienshao is definitely slept on. This Pokemon can be really scary and tough to deal with throughout a lot of matchups because it typically does have the bulk to live any of one neutral hit. It's not the bulkiest thing in the world, that's not what I mean necessarily, but regardless, I think if EV'd and played with properly, it's going to do very, very solidly in that respect. So, good pickup here by D-Ray, and really solid mon here. Next up, we have Nidoqueen for Joe DeFlamin. Do you want to talk about this pick?
Yeah, sure. So, already, I do think Nidoqueen, if nothing else, offers a ton to Joe's team. For one, this is a really good opposing fairy killer for stuff like Dragonite, and while it isn't necessarily, you know, Joe's team is really very weak with stuff like Victini already to sponge hits, it's still definitely appreciated to have something that can be more dedicated to long-term switch-in. Not only that, but this gives Joe his first hazards, which with a momentum core like Koko or Victini is pretty mandatory, I would argue. Even with all the boots going around this generation, this is something you want to always have, in my opinion, when drafting a momentum, especially that is as potent as Koko or Victini. This is also a really good electric switch-in because Dragonite being neutral and Victini not being a resist as well. This is really good to take advantage of Pokemon that might potentially abuse the electric terrain that Koko sets. So I actually really like this set. I think that so far Joe is picking up a really strong set of Pokemon that can really balance each other out well, in my opinion.
Also, picking up one of the best Koko checks in the game is, yeah, pretty nice for your Koko. I only gotta deal with one Nido at most. Next up, though, we have me having to swap over and do the draft picks again, because apparently it only goes to a certain point in the draft slide. So that's annoying. Give me 1 second, guys. It did this last time, and I don't know why. Amazing commentary, by the way. Thank you, Irish Penguin. I appreciate it, boss. Let's do another one, and it's from Joe's pick onward. So I have to find that in the draft slide thing. Thank God I didn't like delete it, right? So sorry, it's gonna be a second, guys. I apologize. NCP draft stream. Then I gotta scroll down to where we're at and find Joe's last pick. So we're gonna click here. Then we're gonna go all the way down and put all these in there. Done. Cool. And then I think I have to set up a... Oh, is that Mandibuzz? Is that the next pick? Did we do it right?
Yeah, that should be the next pick. We just did Nidoqueen. Yep, Mandibuzz is up next.
Oh, it's because it's automatic. Ah, shit. Okay, so we just spoiled the next couple picks. I apologize. So I gotta do this, and then I gotta change the hotkeys because I didn't want to delete it. I just added a whole new one. So I apologize. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. There's always gonna be big ol' mess ups in streams like this.
It's okay though, because this gives us a great intermission to plug the NCP server. If you guys have not already and you are a fan of what you're seeing tonight, make sure to join the NCP server. It is a free, easy way for you guys to not only stay up to date on all the content, but also get pinged with the roles of your favorite coaches. If you want to keep up with Grandmaster D-Ray, Joe DeFlamin, Amel, or anyone else in the league, to join the server, claim a role for your favorite team, and show off your team colors, and stay up to date on any and all content coming out.
It was all on purpose, so Liv could plug it right there. Next up, we have Tony picking up Mandibuzz. Definitely an interesting pickup, though. I will not lie. Having Weavile Mandibuzz as that core, but to be fair, it gives him a good ghost resist, whereas Weavile is not one, so he's not as pressured to, what do you call it, pick up a really, really fat normal, because he has a great ghost resist Mandibuzz. Great U-turn bot. This Pokemon is always just going to click U-turn. If you're not clicking U-turn with your Mandibuzz, you're playing it wrong. So you're clicking U-turn, you're maybe knocking off and foul playing every once in a while and roosting. But 95% of the time, we're U-turning and we're maintaining momentum, getting into Necrozma, Weavile, and Melmetal, and doing some damage. So definitely a solid pickup, and I know Tony really likes this Pokemon. So while it does look a little weird on paper, the fact that he has Double Dark right now, they do very different things for his team offensively and defensively. So I think it's a solid pickup nonetheless. Next up, we have Urshifu Rapid Strike and Dr. Slacking.
So Urshifu Rapid Strike here, I think, at least if nothing else, provides a really good momentum option, considering the only other momentum on this team so far was Latios with Baton Pass, which, while it is a not bad momentum option, it's not something you want to force on every week just to bring in pivots. So I do like the Urshifu here as an actually reliable pivot. Not only this, but this is a really threatening Dark Killer, actually, because unlike something like a Crocodile, let's say, Crocodile can at least switch in on Dark types, but Urshifu can actually just outright break them with very little effort. So I do like that involved. Not only that, but Surging Strikes is a really good way to counter lead against potential rock users to maybe make the dependency on Defogged Latios a little bit less, considering it can just go for Surging Strikes and break through any sort of sturdy or sash sets. So I do actually like this pick a lot for Dr. Slacking's team, and I think it offers a ton to the general synergy of the build.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Great way of dealing with fat boosting, Pokemon that are going to be boosting their defenses, or just fat, really bulky balanced stall builds as well. Next up, we have Starmie from Liv right here, grabbing a very reliable spinner, which is really important for something like Kyurem, so we're not pigeonholed into running boots every single week. While it's great at running boots, maybe we want to run Scar Specs, leftovers, different things like that, which is really, really solid. Giving a Psychic type as well, giving another Fighting Resist. So Fighting types for Kyurem are definitely very, very well covered. It also gives another Ice. It gives an Ice Resist with this team doesn't have already, and just a great overall hazard controlling Pokemon. Grabs great momentum and Flip Turn. It's a great status absorber for this team outside of Clefable. So if there's an unaware Clefable matchup, we have another Pokemon to switch in and take status, Flip Turn out or switch out, get that natural cure going, and is able to deal with it from there. So I think Starmie is definitely a very, very solid Pokemon in that regards, and gives a really solid speed tier for this team. And you're going to see with the direction that this team went, there's very few Pokemon that would fit the speed tier that Liv probably wanted to grab at this point with the archetype of build that she wanted to go with. So I think Starmie was an important Pokemon to pick up really, really early on, which is great. Next up, we have my pick in Scolipede.
So Scolipede here, I think if nothing else, does weirdly enough, despite Scolipede being such a good offensive option and providing a really good Fairy Killer for Owen, that's a little bit more, at least offensively biased than Heatran is. Not to say that Heatran can't be offensive, but it's typically more so thought of as an offensive Pokemon than Heatran, which is more so thought defensively. I think that Scolipede's best offer to this team actually is in the hazards. Having the dual spikes for Garchomp is actually really great because it's a really quick way to wear down Garchomp checks. Stuff like fairies that might otherwise switch on a Garchomp might be forced to run boots and give up their leftovers, which could be really valuable against a team that especially might not have the best removal options. So I definitely like that a lot on this team. Scolipede, I think, as well, offers a really good potential Psychic Killer, which could open up Owen to maybe get some really strong Fighting type later on. Albeit Owen's team doesn't really care about killing Psychics right now, but at the same time, just having that option could maybe get a really good Fighting type for Owen down the road, which, if nothing else, that would actually be really appreciated because it's really good for killing off Ice types for Garchomp, Steel types for Sylveon. So this at the very least fills an adjacent pairing complementary-wise to Owen's actual current drafted Pokemon, if that makes sense. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Owen maybe takes advantage of that with the Fighting type down the road.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Volcarona here from Kaz. Another very solid pickup, a Pokemon that breaks through those fat grasses that Zeraora may not appreciate. So that Pokemon's going to come in, it's going to click a button. I think another thing in Volcarona that a creative builder might be able to use, in the sense that it's not going to have to be, Quiver Dance, set up WinCon every week. It has great options like U-Turn. I've seen just really strong offensive Volcaronas throwing off big overheat to be very solid. Bug and Fire is such a good offensive typing. And it's really, really annoying to deal with a lot of time, especially with hazards being up. A lot of the time, things you'll see checklists are going to be like fat rocks and waters. And one, Volcarona can push past those waters and even set up on them sometimes. As well as, those rocks being very liable to get worn down over the course of the game, as they typically don't have reliable recovery, and he has Ferrothorn. So I think the team he has so far really just complement Volcarona well, and it's a great setup win con for him in a lot of matchups as well. Like, it doesn't have to be, super versatile. It can just come in and Quiver Dance and like Fire Dance or Flamethrower, Fire Blast, and Bug Buzz and just clean through teams, gets Giga Drain for waters. So overall, a very solid Pokemon. And obviously with boots existing this generation, it can benefit from hazards more than it's going to, be hurt by them. So you're not forced into a defog all the time if you are running boots. You just have to be careful about knockoffs and things like that, obviously. Next up, though, we have Seismitoad from Aquarius. You want to talk about Size?
I really think that Aquarius is getting that Pseudo Rain team, and I think it's very obvious right now, in my opinion. I'm totally expecting a Politoed later on, I'll be honest. I know it's not the best Pokemon, but it's one of those really cheap rain setters that could honestly benefit stuff like Zapdos, Scizor, Seismitoad really well. Though, if nothing else, the team does have a really good manual rain option if necessary. Maybe potential manual rain to set up a last second switch from Seismitoad, obviously Hurricane or Weather Ball and Zapdos, the check to fires for really anything, even Thunder Lottie potentially if Aquarius wanted to go that route. So I really love the synergy actually this does provide. It's one of those teams that doesn't need rain to function, and it could still do really well without it. The synergy is definitely there, but I do think it would actually really benefit later on if it was thrown in. Even still, Seismitoad's 1 weakness to grass is really patched out well by every Pokemon above. So I think defensively wise, this is definitely building up to be a really terrifying team, and it's going to be really obnoxious to break.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Next up, we have Kartana from Keegan right here, really getting a really strong offensive breaker with all of this momentum that he has right now. Kartana's going to come in, it's going to click buttons. It's a great way of punishing those waters that want to come in on a Cinderace U-turn. Cinderace U-turns out, Kartana comes in, and it just clicks a button. This thing spreads knockoffs and really chips down its own checks, which I think is really awesome as well. Smart Strike, Sacred Sword's a great option. It can SD past certain teams. You can even go with the speed boosting variant if you go timid and a lot of bulk, which can really catch some opponents off guard and have a great way of beating them. Because a lot of time people will say, I need to either live 2 hits from Scarf Cart, or I need to be able to revenge an offensive like Life Orb or Band variant. If you have the best of both worlds and you're timid speed boosting, you're still ridiculously strong because you're a Kartana, especially if you get up to +2 attack, and then you can speed boost through teams and you have the best of both worlds. So that's a really cool niche option as well for Cart to potentially go for. And it's just an overall really, really solid Pokemon. And I think it really takes advantage of the momentum that, Keegan's team grabs already up to this point. So I think it's a great pickup for him. Next up, though, we have Hawlucha from Amel.
Yes. So I will give a hint because no one has gotten even close. The closest one being the Zodiacs. I will give a hint. If you're trying to guess that maybe Amel is drafting in a reverse order, you're wrong. This is the highest point Pokemon that Amel got in the entire draft. No, that is not a joke. In fact, it will become blatantly obvious for any pick after this. So I will spoil that right now. This is the highest point by a good amount that Amel got. Now, I do not think this gives actually away anything about Amel's theme, but I wanted to at least take out concerns of maybe the budget or really anything related to that might be going on for a theme for Amel's team. I just wanted to narrow out your guesses a little bit more because some of these are really wild guesses. Now, Hawlucha can definitely be really useful. In fact, I know I mentioned that this was the highest point Pokemon that Amel got, but there are still some options that are a little bit less in cost, stuff like maybe Pincurchin or Indeedee, that could actually maybe offer a terrain option if Amel did want to abuse that. Though, I don't know what Amel really is going for synergy-wise. Hawlucha definitely should throw a wrench into a lot of text-based ones, I will say as well, for draft planning. So if anything, this should hopefully help bring in some actual things for Amel's theme for this team. Gives Amel a really good speed tier though, so in terms of what this actually does offer synergy-wise, it's also a really good ice killer, well not an ice killer, a good rock killer for Lapras and Entei. Despite not being a resist, it is still really good to kill them. And obviously for the psychic switch-ins that Hawlucha would definitely benefit from having, Drapion already provides that role. So, I hate to say it, but Amel's team actually does have some synergy. Really hate to admit it though.
For sure. And I think Amel is a player who's going to use Hawlucha very well. Because a lot of time you see Hawlucha only draft on terrain teams. It's going to run Electric Seed, Psychic Seed, whatever terrain it's trying to abuse. Set up a Source Dance and try and win. You're going to see the user try and play 5v6 and set up a Hawlucha sweep, which isn't terrible. But I think Hawlucha's strengths lie in the sense that it can do like unburdened sweeps, but it can also function in like a choice band variant with U-turn. Mold Breaker, Swords Dance variants are also very solid, or defensive defog variants I've even seen do work. I've seen this thing check Urshifu's before because of its dual stab combination, or its dual typing. So I think Amel will use this Pokemon really well. If I were to think of like a random Amel Pokemon, it's Hawlucha. I could see him even with Unburdened coming up with some really weird Unburdened strats with this thing, with items you've probably never even heard of. Next up, though, we have Kurt grabbing Metagross, which I think is really solid, giving him another rocker, which I think is really important because his only rocker right now is Mew, which is a Pokemon that's not going to always want to run it. And then his ground type in Zygarde is a great Pokemon, but comes with the misfortune of not being able to rocks up, which I think is really unfortunate. So getting Metagross, which is a really reliable rocker, especially in the grassy terrain, is great. Grassy terrain weakening Earthquakes coming out at it, or forcing high horsepowers and things like that, which will definitely live from full. As well as giving it passive recovery, which Pokemon without reliable recovery like Metagross with the bulk it has really does appreciate. Leftovers plus terrain, even like Protect, is almost like a pseudo recovery in some matchups, which I think is great. Offensively, this Pokemon is really strong with Meteor Mash and Bullet Punch, Zen, Earthquake if there is no terrain. I believe it also gets Stomping Tantrum or Hammer Arm and things like that. Gets the Elemental Punches outside of Fire Punch. It can Rock Polish up. Weakness Policy is a great option. Clear Body is a great ability for that. And yeah, just a really strong, versatile Pokemon, great with 8 AV. Can do a lot for this team, and especially gives him that really reliable rocker, which I think is really important for Kurt. Next up, we have Big Mamoswine. Speaking of scary rockers.
Ooh, so Mamoswine, I think, offers a really good option just to actually break for this team. This is a really good option around potential, well, forget what I was... Oh my god, I spaced on that. Anyway, it's a really good physical breaker. Point being, it's a physical breaker, can actually run items that can potentially take advantage of the damage output that this would provide. On top of it as well, similar to Chandelure, this, and also Zamazenta to be fair, this benefits a lot from the Thunderous speed control that Jessie has going on. So I think this is really going to be fair, pigeonhole Thunders a little bit into a support role, but this can definitely be managed around later on if there are other options of speed control that Jessie goes to get. But right now, if nothing else, this is an actual rocker for his team. It's a really good priority option that can actually do offensive priority, which Thundurus can do T-Wave priority, but it's not going to be going for the Sucker Punches, etc. So Mamoswine, if nothing else, does give a really good option for that. I don't know. I feel like that the team really just sort of coexists with Mamoswine, if that makes sense. But it's still just one of those Pokemon that can just sort of coexist on a team and just offer a lot to it just by existing.
Oh, for sure. And Jesse shows up just in time for his pick. How's it going, J-Bear? Next up, though, we have another really fat, bulky, annoying Pokemon in Tangrowth, really kind of forming a defensive core here for Tiro, giving him a good water resist, a good Scald switch in potentially for the rest of his team, which really does not appreciate it, and a good water killer as well. Rotom, he can definitely do so, but doesn't want to take those hits being a fire type, which I think is definitely very, very nice here for Tiro. Regenerator, again, most broken ability in the game, and all of them are going. Who would have thunk it? Because the ability is so great. But it can spread knockoffs, it can spread sleep powders and leech seeds, it can earthquake and focus blast and giga drain and things like that. Be a general nuisance. It's a really annoying Pokemon to pivot around despite it not being very offensive, just because of the utility coverage options that it has and the way it can kind of disrupt the momentum of the opposing team if given the right opportunity. So Zangrowth is definitely a good pickup here for Tiro and definitely fits the squad very well. Next up, we have a Keldeo for Hayes.
So, as I mentioned earlier, there were definitely other Pokemon, in my opinion, that could have maybe taken up the breaking role instead of Nidoking. And I think that Hayes probably didn't need both Nidoking and Keldeo. I think that this could have potentially been just a Nidoqueen instead, but it is still a really good option. I don't want to dismiss that because it is still a really terrifying team. I just wanted to mention it because I did bring that up when I brought up the Nidoking point, that it was a lot easier, in my opinion, to supplement really good breakers for Pult, but Keldeo does still offer a lot to the team even still. For one, as I mentioned, really amazing breaker, and it's one that can resist Ice for Dragapult and also kill Darks for Dragapult, so the synergy is truly there. Not only this, but this is also an amazing killer to Rock types for Togekiss, and in terms of switch-ins to Electric types, which is currently shared by Togekiss, Dragapult is a good resist, and Nidoking is an outright immunity, so I think this really does build up its own sort of defensive counterplay. Well, not defensive counterplay, but it checks stuff that would threaten it offensively.
It's a good pivot. Yeah, it's a good pivot.
Yeah,
a lot of things this team doesn't appreciate.
Yeah, and it's a really easy way. It's another one that can bring in Nidoking to actually do some damage. So I think if anything, the goal of the team so far is shaping up to just really enable Nidoking, which it could honestly still work out really well. I'm just looking forward to seeing how Hayes rounds this out in the later picks. It's one of those things we'll just have to wait and see.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Moltres here from Sally to end off round 4 right here. Giving them a great way, not necessarily as an ice immunity, but a great way to punish those Pokemon. A great pairing with Rotom Wash, to be completely honest, really punishing those fat grasses. Now, it's not going to be the greatest ground check in the world, but I think that's a great aspect of having it with Rotom Wash as a momentum core, because Rotom Wash is going to be able to beat pretty much every ground ever, unless it's an extra drill with Mold Breaker. Rotom Wash is going to be able to switch in and essentially resist Edgequake. Moltres, being immune to ground, but obviously dropping to any Stone Edge ever. I think it's really, really important to, have a way of covering, offensive grounds if Moltres is going to be one of your immunities, and he has 2 other immunities up to this point. It also does a big Hurricanes too, so it's a flying type that uses its Flying Stab, and it does not share any weaknesses besides water with Landers, which is not the biggest deal in the world, especially when you have Rotom. So there's a little bit of pressure on Rotom to do a lot right now, but he has a way of wishing and keeping it healthy, and Rotom is, again, really good at resisting those waters. It's not like it's going to be incredibly pressured to do so, and it's going to be hard for it to accomplish that goal, because it is so good at doing that job. So I definitely think that's a fine pickup. And then going into round 5, onto the next round, we are about almost halfway through, pretty much. We have Porygon 2 giving him a nice solid defensive backbone here, giving him a Ghost Resist, which is important to have with something like Jirachi, or a Ghost Immunity, which is something important to have with Jirachi. Now, as for his fighting checks, I think they're a bit suspect at the current moment, just because Jirachi is neutral, and then the rest of his team kind of dies to Knock, Stone Edge, and Ice Punch, so it's a little bit scary for him to kind of deal with those offensive fightings that might try and prey and deal with a Porygon, but he can definitely still patch that up later on, and it can grab great momentum in Teleport for the rest of his team, maybe even set up Trick Room depending on what he gets on later, and just a solid defensive pivot overall for sure. Next up, we have Registeel for Hayes. You want to talk about Registeel?
Yeah, sure. So, it's weird. I like Registeel with Togekiss. I like Registeel with Pult. but I don't actually like Registeel on this team. I think that Registeel, truthfully, is a very easy way to exploit the momentum that Hayes worked really hard to actually build up so far. I do get what it provides here, to be fair. This is an amazing switch into Fairy types, which Nidoking can't really long-term switch in on them. And this is another rocker to maybe take that pressure off of Nidoking. But it's one of those Pokemon, I think, that even as far as like defensive steals went, there were better options with things maybe like Bronzong that could have filled this role a little bit better. But I don't know. I think as I said, there are options on this team that do support Registeel, but I think with how momentum heavy Hayes has seemed to build up the team so far, I'm not liking the Registeel pick, but it could still definitely do stuff on the team. I do think that, as I said, Bronzong would have benefited the team a bit more as well.
Oh, for sure. It's just a bit passive at this point in time for his team. Definitely not a bad Pokemon, but it does kind of suck the momentum, like you said, that he did build up prior. Speaking of Bronzong, we have it going next. So I bet Tiro's very happy that he didn't end up picking up Bronzong, because Tiro ended up getting it here, which is definitely a very solid Pokemon. Again, just another ground immunity with the Rotom right here, giving him another very, very solid Fairy Resist as well, which is great. And a Stealth Rocker, which he did not have up to this point. So getting rocks is great for this team. Being able to passively chip down those things for Urshifu and Gengar. And it really does find a lot of pretty easy rocking opportunities when Urshifu comes in, forces in the Fairy, clicks U-turn, and then the Bronzong comes in and gets a very free rocks. It can body press through teams as well. Iron Defense body press sets are very, very scary to deal with. And I've even seen like Calm Mind Bronzongs do very solid work in specific niche matchups. So it doesn't just rock and then eventually die. It can do a lot of different fun things. I've seen even OTR Bronzong do a lot of work, or Weakness Policy Bronzong, because it's so bulky and it'll live any one super effective hit from a lot of things. So really solid Pokemon, and, you know, fits the team well, gives him good rocks. Next up, we have Zarude from Jesse504.
Yes, so Zarude, honestly, is just a really... honestly, I do think that Zarude is an amazing fit here. With Zarude being a really good option to not only handle Psychics, considering while Zamazenta isn't exactly super threatened by them, it's not a resist, so Jesse had no actual resist at this point in the draft. But not only that, but this is also a really good Ghost check, which is really appreciated actually for Chandelure. This is a really good option to pressure your opposing waters, which outside of Thundurus, this team actually did struggle a bit with. And while Thundurus is a really reliable option to opposing waters, when your other Pokemon on the team are Zamazenta, Crowned, Chandelure, and Mamoswine, you really do want a second check. This is the second pivot on the team actually, which outside of just Thundurus, which while it can pivot, isn't exactly the best pivot long-term speaking. Zarude, on the other hand, is an amazing pivot. This should be able to hopefully help bring in Pokemon such as Zamazenta and Mamoswine a bit easier to actually do some really good damage. So I'm looking forward to seeing what can actually be made of this pick.
Very solid momentum core with Thunders too, yeah. Very, very solid pickup. Next up, we have Carpy, Grab, and Gmole getting himself his Dark type, as well as a Flying type and a Ground immunity, which is great. This Pokemon, absolute demon. I love this thing. From the Spadef side, this thing just doesn't seem to die. It gives him a great Ghost Resist for his Mew and Rillaboom, so that double Psychic Core being paired up with a really, really solid Dark type, which I think is really, really very, very important. It can grab momentum and U-turn. It can Nasty Plot and Agility up with Weakness Policy or just Boots. It can Rest Talk very, very often and very, very comfortably, which I think is great for Kurt here as well. It's a Pokemon that I absolutely love. I'm waiting for them to give this thing Roost in Gen 9 so that it can be a Tier 1 Pokemon, and I'll draft at the end of round 1 every draft. But until then, it's still going to just be a very slept-on solid threat, and it fits on Kurt's team phenomenally. So I think this is a great pickup for Kurt. Next up, we have Lilligant for Amel.
Yes, for anyone who thought I was lying, Hawlucha is the highest pick. And this is not an April Fool's gag. Don't look at your calendar to verify that. This is the highest the highest pick. And clearly the Lilligant is a drop off, to say the least, by about 10 points. This does offer at the very least another water switch in, if nothing else. Especially a really good freeze dry one, since Lapras is actually neutral to freeze dry. Well, no, never mind. This isn't a freeze dry. I don't know why that was where my mind went. Anyway, this is a really good special setup sweeper, since right now the only actual setup that Amel had was physical from Drapion and Hawlucha, so that is pretty good. And it's also an option to actually boost its speed. So I do like it a lot. Not gonna act like this is a good pick, but
it's synergy for what he has. Yeah, you gotta talk about for what he has.
I don't know. I don't even know if I'd call it that. Lapras does the water switching fine. I think this is just one of those really... This is a shoehorn pick, even for what Amel has, in my opinion.
You need that ground resist. That ground resist.
True. Yeah, but the Lapras is switching in on grounds. It's fine. It's fine.
Darkrai having PTSD all the time. Oh yeah, didn't he get swept by a Lilligant like a big tour game? Was it DPL?
Oh,
That
I'm
would
so
suck.
sorry.
Next up, though, a really, really fat team here from Keegan, man. And this Hippowdon showing up next. Really, really solid pickup here. Giving a good catch-all check and a really solid pairing with things like Torn and Slowbro. I think the passive damage is going to be really nice for this team as well. Really just chipping things down with burns from Slowbro, maybe even Toxics from Torn, knocking off items and leftovers, and having Stealth Rock plus Sand Chip really wear things down. It gives a really reliable rocker, which Keegan did not have up to this point. There are no hazards on this team up until this thing comes in, so I think that's really solid as well. And offensively, Hippo can be used pretty well in draft, I think, in my more so than you'll see in like standard smog tiers and things like that. It still is very decently strong, has reliable recovery, edge weight coverage plus the fangs, so like Fire Fang and Ice Fang and things like that. So a great way of really beating down a lot of teams. It can curse as well as a way to boost up and potentially win games in the end. And it's just, again, a general nuisance. This Pokemon's really, really annoying, and I think all the regen spam, momentum, and passive damage that this team is going to provide is going to be very, very annoying to deal with over the point of it. Next up, we have Roserade from Aquarius.
So, Roserade, again, man, every pick makes this look more and more like a pseudo-rain team. This is a really good, if nothing else, as a backup Fairy Killer, really good Hazard Sacker, considering the spikes from this plus the rocks from Seismitoad truthfully are sufficient enough for hazards, despite not, being a ton of setters. Two setters with these two that can always run hazards is honestly really strong in my opinion. Not only this, but the fact that this is a neutral option to ground isn't really the most missed out on thing here. As long as Aquarius gets something that can punish Zygarde a little bit better, because Lottie and Seismitoad on their own will not necessarily cut it. But as long as there can be another option for Zygarde, this team honestly has the makings both offensively and defensively to be one of the best teams in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. It covers itself very, very well. Next up, though, we have Zapdos here from Kaz, giving him another very, very solid breaker. Clumps the speed tiers a little bit with Volk, but it breaks through the things that Volk doesn't appreciate in those fat rocks, which I think is really, really important. Grabs Kaz a little bit of momentum. Zeraora plus G-Zap is going to be able to grab great, great momentum with each other, especially in conjunction with hazards, and it's a Defiant user that can really punish defog attempts from the opposing side, which I think is very, very important as well. So great pickup by Kaz here. Gives him a nice solid breaker and a great way to punish teams and break down teams with Zeraora and Volcarona, and he can probably slowly start to build in the defensive core a little bit more so now with this offense. Next up, Liv is going to talk about my Jellicent. I will be right back. I'm getting a phone call, but Liv, you take over for a minute.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. I'll just make sure to stall through this pick for you. With Jellicent, we do actually get a lot of really good benefits to Owen's draft, actually. I know I said that Scolipede was a bit of a lateral pick, but I think that Jellicent honestly is the exact opposite. This actively offers a lot to Owen's picks, such as a water immunity for Heatran, and weirdly enough, Owen's third immunity, which might not seem like it at first, but considering the fact that he has two Pokemon that have immunity abilities, on top of also the Dragon immunity from Sylveon, this is already shaping up to just outright not care about a lot of different types. Not only this, but this actually, never mind, this is the fourth immunity. I forgot about the Ghost immunity of normal. So 4 immunities right there. Scald Surgeon is actually really appreciated because not only does it benefit Heatran, which is actively weak to water, this also helps a lot with Garchomp and Scolipede, which don't really like being burned. So this takes out the need for Lawn Berries on Garchomp, and also this allows Scolipede to be a bit more offensively potent on this draft. This also makes Sylveon a little bit less dependent for Heal Ball, so it really does patch up a lot of things. Not only this, but this gives Owen actually a really threatening Trick Room option, considering the fact this could set Trick Room and then allow for stuff like Sylveon or Heatran to actually break unsuspecting teams. So I'm really looking forward to actually seeing what Owen can manage to do with this, since right now Owen actually has a really terrifying setup with a lot of different hazard options, some really good offensive and defensive options, some really good support for his team overall, and some really good type synergy too. There's not really a type when you look at Owen's draft that you think, wow, I can just break through this Owen's team with this. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I forgot about the ground immunity with electric. Okay, so there's 5 immunities that Owen has already with 5 picks. That's 1 immunity per draft pick, and I'm kind of hoping he can keep up the trend as he goes on.
Okay, I'm back. I hope I timed it good. All right,
literally
probably had to ramble a little bit.
Timed it at the second.
Heck yeah. On to the next pick in Skarmory for Liv. Times for a little bit more hazards. We only had Clefable as the rocker before, but now we have Rocks and Spikes in Skarmory. It can also Body Press and Defog if we actually don't want Hazards up in general. Skarmory is a very, very reliable defogger. Fizz-Def Wall extraordinaire, so there's not a lot of physical offense that's going to break through a team with Clefable, Buzzwole, Skarmory. Very seldom physical breakers can actually do that, in my opinion. There's no Mega Medicham in this game, thankfully. So this team is obviously very, very sound defensively, and starting to lean, dare I say, in a little bit more bulky, stally. Wait, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see as we keep going. But this is a great hazard setter. It's going to give us a nice bulky steal as well. A Fairy Resist, which this team did not have up to this point. Now we may want a little bit more of a Spadef sponge to switch into those fairies, because one stray Mystical Fire, Thunderbolt away, which a lot of them do have, and Skarmory is pretty much dead. But it's at least a pivot into those, and it may be a way to get into different threats, which I think is nice. But still early in the draft, we'll see where Liv wants to go from here, but still a very, very solid pick up here for the team that she does end up having. Next up, though, we have Whimsicott.
Yes, so Whimsicott already does help out Dr. Sacking a lot. This gives a really good check to Zygarde. Like I mentioned earlier, Aquarius' team was struggling with this, whereas Whimsicott would have been actually a really, really interesting Pokemon in that team, but I think it fits Dr. Sacking's team even better. I know he was saying he was going to get this round 1, so a little bit of an April Fool's from the rest of us, I guess. But this does offer a lot of support to Dr. Slacking's team with stuff like Momentum, which could be great to set up with a lot of your Aegislash. It's a really good pivot even in general with stuff like U-Turn. And also the fact that this can really punish dragons offensively speaking, which can help out a lot with something like an Aegislash that might want to maybe dedicate to a fairy in a specific matchup. So I do like what this actually does provide a lot, in my opinion, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he rounds out the rest of his team. Oh, Colin's going back.
Oh, for sure. Sorry, I'm assuming you just finished, but my cat was trying to climb up the wall. Perfect. Okay, cool. We have Silvally. Talk about Jack of all trades mons. We have a mon that Tony really likes to use, and I can see why. This thing is really, really versatile and really solid in the hands of a good builder. Personally, I think more offensive Silvally variants are going to be the absolute best, especially with that multi-attack buff that Silvally did get. I believe it's at least 120 now instead of 90. Really making SD Flame Charge variants really, really scary, but this is a great U-turn momentum grabber or parting shot momentum grabber depending on the matchup and what you want to do. It can defog. It can just, be special and use its great coverage. And while it won't be multi-attack, but if you're Silvally Water, so multi-attack, maybe you go Surf or something like that. Silvally Fire, you go Flamethrower instead of multi-attack. So there's still great options. And it's, again, a really hard Pokemon to build with from the opposing side. They have to keep into account a lot of things, and really forces the opponent to kind of like determine what the best Silvally sets or what would be worse for them, what Silvally types would be like the most detrimental to their game plan or something like that. Or say like, Tony drafts a ground type, but then he plays a specific electric type that can kind of beat that ground type down. He can always bring Silvally ground. So it's a great kind of flex mon to flex into a lot of different roles to really help him check things that maybe the rest of his team won't do very well. So I actually really like Silvally a lot. It's a great Pokemon overall, and I think it fits Tony's team pretty well. Next up, we have Vikavolt here for Joe DeFlamin.
So honestly, I get what Vikavolt was supposed to do. Similar to, I think this pick, there was just better options than on the board. Not to say that Vikavolt is a bad web setter, because it's actually a really good one. But I think in terms of webs that actually offered something, maybe Joe could have waited a couple rounds and gotten Shuckle, which would have been great considering the only rocker so far on this team is Nidoqueen. And as I mentioned earlier, hazards are something you really, really want to have with Victini and Coco. But the hazards you look for there are more so spikes and stealth rocks, not sticky webs, which especially Coco just doesn't really need that much. Though, again, I get what Joe is going for here. I don't think the Vikavolt is an abuser of that, though, because even with the terrain support, let's say, Vikavolt isn't abusing terrain, considering the fact that it's a floating electric type. So, I don't even think it really has that going for it. I do think this pick was just truthfully extremely shoehorned in. And it's really just here as a point sponge, which for 10 points isn't really something you want to go for, in my opinion.
I think Vikavolt's better suited as just like drafting a Pokemon that fits a team. Like if you want that electric type, breaker as well as that solid pivot and boots and things like that. I'm personally not a big fan of webs in Gen 8 in general. I think the play challenge itself is very, very unreliable with how many things get defogged, the rapid spin buff, and boots existing. I actually personally just won't draft webs to draft webs. Now, will I draft a Vikavolt or a Galvantula because I think they're good offensively or defensively on my team? Of course. But I think with this team, Vikavolt, you're right, it doesn't really offer that. It's kind of just a Pokemon that has webs, and webs aren't the best in my opinion. Next up, though, we have Excadrill for D-Ray. Really, really solid way of breaking through fat defensive fairies for him on top of Slowking. So Hydreigon, Slowking, and Excadrill is a very, very solid core. His team is a bit slow right now with Mienshao being his fastest Pokemon, but again, he can patch that a little bit later on for sure. But this thing is great. It's a great Rapid Spinner as well. Gives him removal, which he did not have outside of Hydreigon up to this point. And also gives him a Stealth Rocker, which he did not have up to this point. This tends to make me believe he may go in a sand route because I don't think Excadrill is typically worth it without sand as at least an option. Personally, I think it's a little bit too point heavy for just being Mold Breaker, Rapid Spinning, Earthquake Clicker. But it can definitely function in that role, which is something else to keep in mind. It can Swords Dance sweep through teams. It can do a lot for a team. So great mon. Next up, we have G-Weezing.
Yes, G-Weezing. So G-Weezing, I think, was actually a really worthwhile pick here. While people mostly think of this as a Levitate option, on a team like this with 2 ground immunities, it could truthfully just function more as a neutralizing gas option to try and stop Pokemon that have really obnoxious abilities, and also just be a really good T-Spike sponge for something like Milotic, which, while most of the team doesn't fear T-Spikes, Milotic, on the other hand, really does not want to be taking a full-on Toxic just because it switched in. So I actually like this a lot here. It's a really good defog option too for this team, so that when Landorus isn't forced into it, because especially with the fact that Landorus is the only rocker right now, having a really good defogger at least that doesn't force Landorus to run both defog and rocks is definitely really appreciated here in my opinion. And speaking of moving on to round 6.
Okay.
I was literally gonna go into that. Moving on to round 6, speaking of Landorus, we have Raikou, which Raikou Landorus actually is a really good pairing in my opinion, offensively speaking. They're both really good offensive options, and with Raikou being able to take on water types for Landorus, and Landorus being able to take on ground types for Raikou, these two really open up each other a lot to do some really good damage in a game in my opinion, which helps Patmac's team offensively speaking become extremely potent in my eyes. I just hope that Patmac really does get a really strong Spiker, or at least a couple more Rockers later on, because I would really hate to see Landorus forced into Helmet every week, despite it being a really good Helmet user if nothing else.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Decky Dewey from D-Ray, grabbing himself a ground resist, which is great because he was incredibly ground weak up to this point, only having the Hydreigon as the immunity. This Pokemon grabs great momentum. It can defog, it can Swords Dance, it can Nasty Plot. Really versatile low point grass. It's actually my favorite out of the 3 grass ghosts that you see people draft. Definitely my favorite by far. And there's like those 3 grass that you see in like the same point tier, and like Delmise, Serena, and Decidueye. Decidueye is definitely my favorite. I think this Pokemon is incredibly versatile and can do a lot of things really well in a matchup. Long Reach is actually a pretty slept on ability when you want to U-turn around but not take Helmet Chip, not get Flame Body, not get Static. I think that's also great as well. So great pickup here by D-Ray. Next up, we have Virizion from Joe.
So Virizion here I do actually like a lot. I will say that Virizion actually offers Joe a ton of different options. For example, this is a really reliable Scald Twitchin, because while Dragonite is also a really good Scald Twitchin, Virizion could potentially do it and be hurt a lot less from running a special set, since Dragonite just has so much more physical attack than special attack. And Virizion, on the other hand, could definitely be a really strong Calm Mind option. And also, it's a grass type that has Synthesis, which I feel like a lot of people forget. But Virizion does actually get Synth, which is really useful when trying to run such a Spadef grass like Virizion. This is also, on top of that, a really good Steel Killer for Dragonite, so that does... I think, really, this is mostly here as a Dragonite support, though Virizion Victini is still a really good pairing, in my opinion. Just, I think that, truthfully, this benefits Dragonite more than anything else in Joe's team.
Oh, 100%. Next up, we have Aromatisse. Tony grabbing his Wishpasser, as well as grabbing a Trick Room Setter for that Melmetal, which I think is actually decently valuable for his team. I'm not the biggest fan of Trick Room in singles, but if you can't position it well, Melmetal can put in a lot of work under Trick Room, and it's a mon that can't be taunted, so it's a great Wishpasser, Trick Room Setter, and Cleric in that right. He can pass wishes into the Melmetal, into the Necrozma, into the Mandibuzz, even if he doesn't want to Roost, into the Silvally, which doesn't have any recovery, which is really solid, as well as heal building off any burns, Thunderwaves, or Toxics that his fatter mons wouldn't appreciate, like the Necrozma, Mandibuzz, and the Melmetal. So I think this pickup's actually very solid here for Tony. And I know a lot of the fairies were kind of going at this point, and there wasn't a lot of them left. So him grabbing this at this point was probably at the point in which he needed to grab it if he wanted to reliably have something like that. Next up, Volcanion.
So Volcanion on Dr. Slacking's team I think is actually a really worthwhile pick in my opinion. I know that it's not the most reliable option, but Tailwind support for this with Whimsicott as a Price user could be a little bit more potent than we normally see it in draft. And with Tailwind, Volcanion actually can really benefit from that speed control. Not only that, but this is a really good sponge to Fairies for Lottie. This is a really good sponge to Fire types for Aegislash. It's a really good Skull Twitching for Crook and Urshifu. So this truthfully, I think is like, if you had to put one Pokemon in to give as much synergy to the other 5 as possible, weirdly enough, I would actually say the Volcanion fits that job to a T. And again, I don't think it does synergy for any one of these perfectly, but it is probably the only Pokemon I can think of that can truthfully benefit all 5 at this current moment. So I think this is like a really good eye actually by Dr. Slacking. And I think, again, there's really not an option I think he could have picked better here in my eyes.
Oh, 100%. Next up, we have Blissey. Speaking of Spadef sponges and maybe a little bit more of a stally balance approach from OliviaSama, the scumbag right here. I don't like that this thing has reliable recovery. I'm upset that this is stall. But good rocker, great Spadef sponge. This mon can teleport around. It's knock fodder in the sense that it doesn't want to lose its boots or its leftovers very often, but less knock fodder than Chansey. Definitely better this generation in my opinion, and better in draft in general, just because knock is so prevalent in so many different Mon's movesets. If it's not OU, then they can specifically run it for, you know, the Chansey matchup that they see. So this Pokemon is great on I'll just say at this point, a stall or semi-stall balance build. Passing fat wishes, well, maybe not that. Passing fat wishes to the rest of the team as well, to where they don't even have to take the turn to fully recover and things like that. And actually really opening up Clefable in that sense to not really have to be that wish passing mon, because you have a whole Blissey now, which is great. It can Seismic Toss for more reliable damage and has still great Gen 1 coverage, and if spec'd into offensively correctly, it won't be as big of stud fodder as something like a Chansey would be. So really just kind of a necessity on a team like this, and we see the return of the dreaded Skarm Bliss core, and I'm sure we'll get at least two, like at least a thumbnail where you go like Skarm Bliss is still broken this NCP season.
I have it made already.
Yeah, because you know it's going. Yeah, oh, it's like
it's coming.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have my pick in Celebi. A little less fat and annoying, but still fat and annoying.
Yeah, so Celebi here, if nothing else, I think actually does really round out a lot of synergy on this team. For one, this is a really good ground switch-in, which currently Owen actually shockingly enough lacked, despite having the Jellicent as a really good offensive response to grounds. He currently did lack the actual ground switch in here. Not only that, but this is also a really good option for stuff such as Psychic types, which currently, while Owen did have some options that could threaten them offensively, again, nothing really defensively that can actually resist. Well, actually, Heatran is a really good Psychic resist, to be fair. This in general, I feel like is one of those Pokemon that, again, similar to how Volcanion functioned for Dr. Slacking, this really does kind of round out every single pick on this team. For example, this is a really good option for opposing waters for Heatran if maybe Jellicent doesn't want to do it, or grounds for Heatran. If maybe Garchomp just doesn't want to be running rocks and Heatran can't come to a game, because Heatran isn't one of those upper tiers that can come to every match, Celebi can maybe be the defensive rocker, which also helps open up Heatran a bit more, to be fair. I can go down the list, but I don't want to spend too much time breaking down everything this offers. But I do think that Celebi in general does really fit this team well, in my opinion.
For sure. And Healing Wish, the best move in the game.
Yes. Broken.
Next up, we have a Alolan Persian from Kaz here, giving him a little bit more momentum, free momentum, and especially really annoying momentum with hazards and things like that. Forcing in Pokemon, getting off parting shots, getting off U-turns. As opposing members come in, they take that spike, they take those rocks, and kind of have to pivot around. And again, spreads knockoffs, which is really, really important with, you know, fatter hazard stack balance builds like Kaz has right now. Which is obviously really great. It's a fast taunter. It's a dark type as well, which he did not have up to this point, which is really, really important, especially when your steel is something more passive like Ferrothorn, to where, I mean, he isn't playing a Reuniclus, but a Reuniclus type mon and a Necrozma type mon, to where you have that dark type at least, because your steel isn't necessarily going to beat every psychic in the world, if they are the correct set. Now, Persian isn't the fattest Spadafwall, but with an AV or spec'd into correctly, it will live pretty much any one hit from like those bulky psychic types. Which is still really, really important to have. And again, spreads knockoffs, spreads taunts, and it's just really good at its very simple job of being an annoying pivot and momentum grabber here. Next up, we have Arcanine for Aquarius.
This is the first time I'm going to finally change what I'm saying about Aquarius' team. It's a Pokemon that does not actually make us a rain team. In general, though, Arcanine offers a lot to this build, obviously. It's a really good steel switch-in, which can help potentially take the pressure off of, let's say, the Scizor from being a steel option, or the Seismitoad. Or even Zapdos. This is a really good one to actually just dedicate to really switching in and then abusing with stuff like a Will-O-Wisp or even just momentum from a teleport. Not only this, but with the Boots edition this generation, Arcanine is not as susceptible to hazards, which can make the Intimidate spam really valuable for maybe a setup Lottie or even just a Zapdos to do some really good damage against offensive grounds that might pack a Stone Edge. So I like that option a lot. I will say though, the bit of the clump in the speed tiers in that 90 to 100 range is looking a little bit prevalent right now. But to be fair, if Aquarius maybe rounds at the low and high ends a little bit more, this might not end up being too big of an issue. Other than that though, the only other thing I have, which as I said last pick, while it is not the biggest issue, I would love to see from a team like this, especially one that has as much momentum as Aquarius does, maybe a little bit more hazards than just Rose Raid and Toad. But again, I don't think this generation is as big of a deal as it would have been in, let's say, a Generation 7, where you really didn't need like 3 or 4 hazard setters to really function a team like this. It just would take a bit of the building pressure off of Rose Raid and Toad is all.
I'm really liking Aquarius team. Oh yeah, it's definitely very, very solid for sure.
It's really nice.
Next up, we have Diancie from Keegan. Specking into the lower tiers, grabbing a couple rolls that he didn't have necessarily. One, and a good flying resist. And the Diancie being a rock type, obviously a steel type isn't very good at doing so because it is a Kartana and it doesn't resist flying or anything special for that matter. But also a very solid stealth rocker outside of a Powdon. 2 very reliable rockers. This one's, again, a little bit more low tiered of an option, but it's great at it. And it's a fairy type as well as a cleric. So really does tick off a lot of boxes for his team and roles that he needed to fulfill. Despite being a lower tiered Pokemon, and it's very, very solid. It can also even be offensive in like OTR offensive Trick Room sets, Calm Mind variants, Iron Defense variants, Double Dance variants with Stored Power and Draining Kiss. Really, really bulky, really, really annoying, and honestly, really, really solid Pokemon for a low tier fairy. So definitely a very, very solid pickup for Keegan here. Next up, we have Hamel. Speaking of interesting drafts, Jelvin Thomas, I don't know if you've seen this. Again, look at Amel's team, and I want you to tell me what his drafting theme is. What theme team is Amel going for? Again, I don't think any of you will get it.
I'm giving Amel 15 seconds of my time from here on out and looking at these next picks. Amel has a really good offensive option of flying with this. On top of that as well, this is an actually threatening option, I would argue, to Waters, because right now it's really just Freeze-Dry Lapras. And, I mean, you can make the case for Lilligant. I don't want to, though. The speed tier is actually kind of good on this with the 96. It's a nice actual abuser of it, because, again, Lilligant, I think, in this team is more shoehorn defensively speaking. Dedenate's cool. It's a good fairy type for Amel, I guess, for 1 point, if you're really going to call it that. That's all I'm giving Amel.
Let's go. Okay, next up we have Kirk grabbing Lycanroc Dust, giving him that 110 speed tier, which is very, very solid for his team, as well as giving him another stealth rocker, a little bit more offensive of a rocker, but it's honestly a very good offensive rocker because it forces very specific switches, and it's fast enough to where it'll at least outspeed things, even if they do stay in and elect to knock you out or something like that. You're pretty likely to get up your rocks. It has great priority options in Sucker Punch and Cell Rock, Tough Claws, Close Combats, and Crunches, and Psychic Fangs, and can throw off big Stone Edges and Swords Dance Up and stuff like that. And yeah, really, really solid Pokemon. Can also SD sweep through teams, but just Band and Life Orb variants are really typically going to be your bread and butter. And this thing with Tough Claws boost hits is going to be damn tough to switch into. And yeah, just a very, very solid Pokemon overall. So I like it a lot. And honestly, with Rillaboom, giving it free switch-ins on those fires and flyings that it forces in gives it a lot of opportunity to be very solid offensively on a team like this. So I like that pickup a lot here for Kurt. Next up, we have Tapu Fini for J-Bear.
Yes, so as we mentioned earlier, there was definitely a more round 2 Pokemon, to say the least. I will say, though, I know we mentioned that Jesse did make some actual free agents. This was not one of them. He just got his Pokemon this round.
I think at this point he decided that he was going to make make transactions. He was like, I'm dropping Slowking because he got sniped or something.
He literally said, yeah, he said that I sniped him a Blissey.
That's what it was.
He made the decision to make his free agents at this exact pick. I don't like this Pokemon that it was around at round 6. Fuck you, Jesse.
Yeah.
Fuck you. I just gotta put it out there. I don't like that he got this at this pick, but it does make Jesse's team go from like a 6 out of 10 draft to like a 9 out of 10 draft, in my opinion. Again, fuck you, Jesse. I don't like that you got this. This offers a lot to Zama, though. It's a great T-Wave and Burn immunity for it, which is truthfully extremely vital. It's a Burn immunity for Mammothorn as well. Takes a lot of the pressure off of Jungle Healing so rude. Finny is a really good middle speed tier that doesn't necessarily need to invest in speed because something like Mammothorn or Chandler might. This is one of those options that can maybe take advantage of the lower end of the 85 spectrum. It's a great water switch in that doesn't need to necessarily pressure Zarude into forcing Jungle Healing to switch in on Scalds and risking burns. This really fixes every issue you could have possibly said that Jesse's team had, in my opinion. Fuck you, Jesse.
No, it's definitely a really solid Pokemon. It does like that Zama won't be able to rest talk as easily, but other than that, provided he gets good wish support for Zama, I don't think it's that big of a deal, and it really does. Again, it makes it where Zama can like beat Fat Waters, because they could just howl in their face, and they do 15% with Scald and don't get the burn. It just howls up and like Wild Charges through them, or even just Close Combat or Behemoth bashes through them, depending on what they are. So yeah, definitely a very solid pickup here for Jesse. Next up, the backup to Tapu Fini in T-Row. I know he's super upset because he was getting Fini this next pick, but he didn't end up getting him, which would have been great on his team, in all honesty. But he ended up waiting too long and picking up Comfey right here. Really solid budget fairy. I know a lot of people give Comfey shit, but I like it a lot. With Triage allowing it to priority Draining Kiss and Synthesis, it can also leech Seed up. U-turn, grab Momentum, Defog, and Toxic, and Calm Mind variants are good as well with stored power for those fat poisons. And it can really just be a really annoying nuisance Pokemon that can steamroll through teams, provided they're unprepared, they let their checks get a little bit too chipped. So I like Comfey a lot. I think if used correctly, it's going to be very solid. And, you know, if he's scared of like, you know, more offensive dragons, he still has something like Bronzong, which checks most of them very, very well. And provided he gets maybe better fighting resist. Fighting types are a little bit tough because Comfey's not the most physically defensive Pokemon in the world. But Tangrowth can check most of them, which is nice as well. So that's going to be T-Row's pick. Next up, we have G Darmanitan for Hayes.
Yes. G-Darm is one of those Pokemon I remember at the beginning of the gen was like extremely, and now we're seeing it go around 6. G-Darm offers this team a lot though. This truthfully is like that breaker that Hayes needed to maybe take a little bit of the pressure off of Nidoking to do the soul breaking. Not only this, but it's a really good check to grasses for Keldeo. It's a really good check to grounds for Nidoking. Overall, this is just a truthfully mandatory option to make this an offense, but again, it really goes into the making Registeel an awkward pick here in my opinion. But we'll have to see what Hayes can do. Maybe it's just gonna be a team of 10 plus like Registeel being existing there.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Sally Mumble with his next pickup, and Slurpuff being one of the few remaining fairy types left, but honestly a really slept on option. It can wish up things, it can belly drum and sweep, as well as Calm Mind and Cotton Guard through things. It can also Sticky Web up, Flamethrower for good coverage or steals, as well as Drain Punch. So very solid budget fairy option. Again, it seems a little bit early for something like a Slurpuff, but there really wasn't that many left, so it's not that big of a deal in all honesty picking something up like this right now, because I can't really think of any of them that were really left over at this point, to be completely honest. After this though, he's going to grab Komodo, which is a very, very scary offensive threat here from Sally Mumble. Really being able to set up on so many different spectrums, whether it be Iron Defense, Bulk Up, Swords Dance, Dragon Dance, Autotomize, Clangorous Soul, which is allowed, which is an Omni Boost. So there's really a ton of options for this thing. It's also a really, really good fat defensive rocker, and a really, really good fat defensive pivot as well. Body Press is a great tool for this thing, and its offensive coverage is great. Really just struggles with fairies a lot of the time, but he has Jirachi, which is actually a really good pairing with this thing if it wants to wish it up and things like that. So Jirachi checking fat psychics and fat fairies, which Komo typically wouldn't appreciate very well. And Komo checking good, strong offensive dark types. Next up, we have Incineroar.
Yes, Incineroar. So actually, again, also really like this pick of the team. I think Hayes has so far done a really good job at drafting a really good offense. Besides the Registeel. I'm going to keep harping on it because it keeps becoming more and more prevalent. But Incineroar in general offers a lot. It's a great Ghost Switch in for Pult, which, truthfully, Hayes somehow didn't have by now, which I'll be honest, looking at the team, it didn't feel like Ghost Week. Somehow, though, it became really noticeable when Incineroar got picked up. This is already built into the team fairly well with stuff like Togekiss checking grounds. Incineroar is great to counter steals for G-Darm, so it doesn't necessarily need to be locking into Flare Blitz. And just helping, again, the team really does build itself well offensively. There's not a Pokemon that really switches in on Hayes' threats here.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Tiro grabbing Swampert, a really, really solid defensive rocker, giving him his water type as well as his ground. So great roll compression. Honestly, a really late Swampert. You typically see it go a lot earlier in this, especially when Seismitoad goes. One of them goes and the other one goes usually right after. It's like the Nidos. So yeah. I'm really surprised he ended up getting this thing round 7. It's one of my favorite rockers, especially this gen getting an addition in Flip Turn to its move pool, allowing it to grab momentum for itself and its teammates, which is really, really great. And again, giving him that great roll compression and a fat water and a good ground type as well and a good rocker. So great Pokemon overall. He has that great top end offense of Urshifu Gengar and a really solid balance build underneath that with the Rotom through the Swampert. So very, very solid here for T-Row. Next up, we have Chansey.
Chansey. I tried to time that perfectly with you. We have Chansey though. So it became really apparent that I sniped Jesse of Blissey, even though he blatantly did tell me that I did. This was just him proving to me that I did. So I'm really glad that I sniped him of Chansey. With Chansey, well, Blissey I should say. Chansey does offer, obviously, the normal type with momentum for Jesse still. It's a really good Ghost Switch in, which takes a little bit of the pressure off of Zarude at least to do that. It's another Stealth Rocker, which takes the pressure off of Mamoswine. I'm not really huge on Chansey in this team, though, because Chansey is very, very susceptible to knockoff, which already most of Jesse's Pokemon are really susceptible. Though I will say with Zama, to be fair, this does complement well because Zama is as good of a knockoff switch as you could have gotten, considering this is not losing an item and it's already a really good resist. So if I had to pick something, yeah, I think a Zama would be the partner with Chansey. Still don't like it though. I think a Chansey in draft is just not that great in my opinion.
It still passes. It passes ridiculous wishes, and like you said, it's knock bait, but Zama's free on knock, and even on a lot of offensive fighting types. You can EV Zama pretty easily to take 2 Urshifu close combats if it's not banded. So like, yeah, this thing's
kind
crazy.
of insane.
So I think this pairing is definitely solid, and it teleports and grabs good momentum into things like Zama, and it can Wish teleport into it, as well as Healing Wish into something like Zama, into something like Thundurus, Mamoswine, Zarude, which I think is a really, really important aspect of Chansey on this team. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say the pairing is amazing. I just don't like Chansey in draft is all. I don't think it's that great, but it fits the team immensely well.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Heracross. Kurt grabbing a Spiker, but more so a phenomenal breaker for his team. This thing, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just me personally. Whenever I play a Heracross, I feel like I have to sack 2 Pokemon guaranteed. This Pokemon is something I really struggle to deal with defensively, and a lot of other teams will do so as well. Between Close Combat, Megahorn, and Facade, not much is going to switch into a Heracross. I got Spikes this generation, and while it's a good tool on paper, I don't see it typically applied very often because I feel like in most instances, if you have your Heracross in for free, even if you're forcing a switch, you're usually 2-hit KOing a lot of things. So I personally think you're better off just attacking with it. But if there's a matchup where he really needs Spikes and he does not want to bring it on Mew, as I would not want to, I think this is still a very solid option in doing so. And having this thing in conjunction with things like Gmult, as well as the Mew, and things like, Zygarde as well, really breaking those fat grasses for that thing, it's going to be really solid. So I love Heracross on this team, and I think it's a great breaker, and it's a mon that Kurt will use as well. Next up, we have Restart and the slides. So give me 1 second while I get that going, guys.
Yes. While we are going, for these later picks, we are going to try and go a little bit faster just to make sure that we are finished for the 3 p.m. EST, which is when you will start seeing your favorite coaches' draft analysis is going live. And if you want to get notified for when your favorite team is going up, you have 2 options, of course. For one, you can go in the NCP server, which should be pulling up on your chat any moment now, and pick up your favorite coaches' roles, where you can get at by your coaches every time they post an upload, whether it's a draft analysis, a game, or any other type of vids they want to put up for the NCP season. The other option, of course, is to do exclamation point with your team and click on their links. We've been doing it automatically for you guys, obviously, as the team goes on. So if you see a team come up that you really want to support, you'll see their coach's link come up very shortly after we start discussing their pick. And go and support your team. Subscribe with notification bell on so you don't miss their uploads, and you can obviously keep up with their entire NCP season and see them maybe go for the crown. Now, on terms of our actual pickup at this point, we had Shuckle. Now, we're going to go back to the, of course, guessing Amel's theme here. It should only become less and less obvious as the picks go on, I promise you guys that much.
That's what I mean. I should have put some stakes on it. I should have been like, I'll do a fucking Minecraft stream if someone guesses Amel's stream. Nobody's getting it.
I promise you, they would have had to either have DM'd Amel, or they would have had to been a coach. And even then, Amel...
Or someone that Amel told. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, with that said, though, Shuckle here, this is quite literally Amel's last... Well, one of 2 last good picks, I would argue. Shuckle does actually make this team a little bit scary, and for 2 points, this is actually a cool pick. I'll give Amel that. It's a good rocker for Amel. It's a good web support. It's actually Amel's first rocker, which, shockingly enough, with all the budget and a lot of budget mons that get rocks randomly, it's his first rocker, which is kind of funny, I will say. Oh, yeah. But Shuckle for 2, I think this is actually a good pick. Unironically, I think that this is Amel's last good pick, besides maybe his round 10.
It's definitely an interesting team nonetheless. Next up, we have Big Dragapult, and actually, I love this pickup for Keegan here because I'm typically not a fan of Hippo Sand teams, right? I'm not a fan of Hippo Drill because I feel like the two Pokemon kind of get checked and beaten by the same things. So it's really hard to position in Drill to do well when your Hippo forces in the things that Drill loses to, right? And it can't push past them. Like, they don't overwhelm each other's checks. Zolt, on the other hand, I think is the exact opposite, and Zolt really does push through those fat waters that, what do you call it? A lot of these teams hate, and with Hidden Power not being a thing, a lot of the grasses that would switch and resist the electric, as well as the ground for Hippowdon, can't really beat Zolt a lot of time either, in conjunction with like Mixed Fire Blast or even like Life Orb Dragon Claw sets. This thing can be really, really scary to understand if he is aggressive enough and positions it enough with enough turns of sands, just Bolt Beaking, Fire Blasting, and Dragon Clawing through a lot of different teams. So I love Zolt plus Hippo. I think it's actually a really, really solid core, and I think it's a great way of making use of the Hippo that was already good on his team and giving himself a sand aspect as well. So I think Zolt's actually a really cool pickup on Keegan's team. I really like his draft so far. It's by far one of my favorites. Next up, we have Snorlax from Aquarius.
So Snorlax, I think, actually fits this team rather well. It's a great ice switch in, which is really useful for stuff like the Lottie and the Zapdos, even though they weren't necessarily like having an ice team. Still appreciate it, especially when the water is neutral. It's obviously with Thick Fat also on the flip side able to switch in on fires a bit easier, which is really appreciated for Scizor specifically, as well as Roserade. Again, not that the team was fire weak, but it is helpful. This is, however, the first Ghost Switch on the entire draft, which is really useful when using a Latias. On top of it as well, with only one weakness to fighting, this is really useful considering the switch-ins to fighting are Latias and Zapdos of all things, with Roserade still being another option if necessary. Overall, Snorlax, amazing Pokemon on this team, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Aquarius utilizes it.
Oh, for sure. Fits super well. Next up, we have Toxapex from Kaz, and this completes that kind of that really solid defensive core that I was hinting at earlier. Ferropex Reuni is ridiculously hard to break through. Realistically, the only thing that's going to push through a core like this is a really strong ground type, really just clicking strong neutral earthquakes, because it breaks through Pex and Fair and Rio don't resist them. Other than that, these Pokemon almost cover each other pretty much perfectly, and it's really annoying to deal with. He does have regen on this thing, obviously, as a pivot option, and Reuniclus can be regen as well, but it's typically going to be Magic Guard, like I said before, in conjunction with all the hazards, as well as the passive damage that Pex is going to force with Toxics and Scalds, as well as its own T-Spikes, is ridiculously solid. It gives him his bulky water, it gives him his poison, so a great pickup here by Kaz. So, very solid. Next up, we have my pick.
We have, yes, Owen's pick, Scrafty. And I'll be honest, I love Scrafty in this team, but I just wish there was a fighting type that maybe could have taken a little bit more of an advantage of Scolipede being a psychic killer, because I feel like at this point, Scolipede's use, at least offensively speaking, is a little bit more diminished here. Not that it's bad, it still actually is a really good behemoth, and can definitely muscle past teams just on principle how Scolipede functions, but I think just at least Scolipede's usage here, or purpose here, could have benefited a little more from that, though Scrafty still does offer a lot. For one, this is the first Ghost Switch in which, with the Jellicent and Celebi defensive core, was actually rather needed at this point. Scrafty also is a really good option offensively speaking, not only during Trick Room, but also with just Dragonets in general, could really sweep past teams, and I know this is a Pokemon that in general Owen has proven to use really well, in NCP in fact, in past seasons, so I am really looking forward to seeing its usage on this draft.
I think I have 4 members on this team that were on my Championship Season 4 team. I think I just like Sylveon, Scolipede, Jellicent, Scrafty were all on the Championship team. All of them.
That's kind of funny. I didn't even notice that till now.
No broken Sandlottie, unfortunately, though. Or big broken Zergatry. I'll spoil it. Didn't draft Zergatry. Next up, we have Liv picking up Rhyperior, giving her a very reliable rocker. Very solid Pokemon, honestly. I love Gen 8 Rhyperior because of the fact there's no more hidden power. Solid Rock is such a solid ability defensively and offensively, facilitating like Swords Dance fat sets like Fat SD Rhyperior, even if it's just like max speed def. Not really even a very attack invested. Just throwing a big +2 Earthquakes in Stone Edges or Rock Slides is really solid. It gets Elemental Punches as well as Mega Horn, and the team covers its weaknesses phenomenally, whether it be Special Waters, Physical Waters, grasses, whatever it may be. This team has good pivots into those types of Pokemon, which I think is really solid. Again, really reliable rocker and a really slept on Pokemon in Generation 8 here. And I think a really solid, ground type and rocker on this stall-based build. Takes a little bit of pressure off of Clef and Blissey and Scarm to set up rocks every single week. So very solid right here in Rhyperior for this dirty, disgusting, stupid stall build from Liv.
That's
Next
so
up,
mean.
We have Braviary for Dr. Slacking. Really interesting. I never see this thing drafted.
Yeah, Braviary is one of those Pokemon you don't really see go, but I think that it's honestly kind of a cool addition here. It's a really cool breaker as well as a good pivot, potentially. I don't know. I feel like, weirdly enough, I both love and think that Braviary is kind of excessive here. Though I will say one thing this does offer, which actually, thinking back, I saw the Urshifu and instinctively thought, oh, there's a Ghost Switch in. There actually isn't a Ghost Switch on this team, besides Crook. So having the secondary check to Ghost is actually really appreciated, if nothing else. Especially with the fact that this is an actual immunity. Now, is this like gonna check every single Ghost type? Certainly not. But it's just nice to have the secondary option in case Crook can't do it in a certain week. I don't know, I feel like Braviary at least is a good Scarf option, outside of just Crook and Lottie, and potentially Urshifu, though Urshifu on this sort of team, I think maybe a bit more from breaking. Though, if Braviary goes into that role, I guess Urshifu could be the Scarf for there. Really cool option, though. Love to see Braviary going. It's one of those Pokemon I think it just doesn't get drafted enough.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Big Gastron. Both of the Gastron on the slide. I didn't even notice that when I picked it up. Pink one is the superior Gastron, though the green and blue one looks better with Tony's logo. So maybe it would have looked better on the slide. But the pink one, we love the pink one. That one's sick. But gives Tony a couple things that he did not have. One in his bulky water, as well as a ground type. Now, I will say Tony's team is struggling for Stealth Rocks. His only rocker is Necrozma, and that makes me so sad because that means he's going to be running Rocks Necrozma a lot, and we don't like doing that in this house at the very least, which is really unfortunate. But Gastron's a very solid defensive water and ground nonetheless. It gets reliable recovery, it gets clear smog to deter setup, and it can scald Ice Beam and Earth Throw through a lot of things. And despite not being very offensive, that is, you know, a very solid combination of just neutral moves to hit a lot of teams very solidly. It can also toxic down things and, you know, just be a general nuisance. It's a great way of beating strong electrics, which Tony ridiculously struggled with up to this point. So I think that's definitely very solid. It's also pretty light, so it's not going to drop to every grass knot from every X random electric type that gets that move for some reason. So pretty solid pickup for Tony. Again, I just really think he's struggling rocks wise. Hopefully he can pick something else up soon that can help him out with that. Next up, we have Tentacruel from Joe.
Yes, Tentacruel. For some reason, I thought you said Tentacruel from Chael, and I was very confused there. But Tentacruel does offer a bit to this team. For one, while Joe still only has Nidoqueen for hazards, besides, I guess, T-Spikes and Tentacruel, this does at least give a Rapid Spin option, so if Joe picks up another rocker later on, which I'm really hoping he does with this offensive core that he has going on with Tapu Koko Victini, then this is really appreciated because it helps the hazard stacking stand out a lot more. However, Tentacruel, I don't know, I feel like it's one of those Pokemon, I think that Joe just got it because he wanted a Rapid Spinner, and not because it fits that well here, because I don't really think it does, even though Joe really appreciates the water typing. This isn't really a team that I think I would have gotten a second Poison on, because it's going to basically force Dragonite to be defensive every single week, if not Vikavolt. But Vikavolt doesn't really want to switch in on a lot of grounds, because even though both Dragonite and Vikavolt are Rock weak, Dragonite at least typically can punish the Rock coverage a lot more on grounds because of multi-scale, and Vikavolt just really doesn't typically do that. So I feel like it's just kind of a weird checklist pick, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Miltank for D-Ray, giving him a Ghost immunity, which I think is important because while he does have Hydreigon, Hydreigon doesn't want to be pressured to check every single Ghost, and some of them, honestly a lot of them, have Dazzling Gleam or Focus Blast, really being able to push through it. So having a really good fat normal to pivot in and take those Ghost hits is going to be really, really appreciated on this team. It also gives him another rocker outside of just Excadrill, which is very, very nice. We don't want to force Excadrill into rocking every single week if we don't have to, even if it is very good at it. It can Seismic Toss through things. It can Curse Up. It has decent coverage. It gets Thunder Wave and Toxic as well. And I think it's another really slept on aspect of Miltank is its speed tier, and base 100 is really nice for a mon as bulky as it. Having such a high speed tier and being so fat is really nice for mons that are going to want to, you know, like outspeed and, you know, really break down fat defensive cores by taunting them or just overwhelming them. Miltank being able to outspeed them and either Thunder Wave them or Toxic them or Seismic Toss them down before they can sub up or, you know, have X coverage move is really solid actually. So I like Miltank a lot. Definitely a solid Pokemon, and it gives D-Ray some things that he definitely needed. Next up, we have Dragapult from Patmac.
Yes, finally Patmac gets that other rocker. As I was talking about earlier, at least a couple more would really make this a broken team, in my opinion. Dragapult as well with the Glare support is actually amazing for Landorus. Pulls off a lot more Swords Dance variants that way, as well as Lucario for Swords since they're nasty plot sets. Dragapult also helps a little bit with the defensive backbone if, let's say, Landorus doesn't want to be the helmet sweeper. That's fine. Well, the helmet breaker, wall, I should say. Dragapult can easily do that with Rough Skin plus Rocky Helmet, or even Rough Skin plus Leftovers would do the job as well. So I like the Dragapult pick here a ton. It's really patched in already defensively speaking, and I think it works fairly well on top of the next pick for round 8 being Serena. Up being a rapid spinner here, I will say, makes it at least the fact that Pat Mac only has 2 rockers so far, a little bit less bad. And unlike with Tentacruel, I do think this wasn't as shoehorned in, considering Serena actually I think does offer a lot to this draft. It's another really good pivot on top of the Landorus, the Raikou, and the Milotic. It's really good offensively speaking as well. And weirdly enough, this is actually a pretty good Scarfer for Pat Mac, because right now it was just Lucario and the Landorus I would argue is good Scarfers. So having another good Scarf option actually could be really threatening to a lot of teams. This also has Aromatherapy, which is pretty useful in case it wants to clear through Skull Burns. However, with the G-Weezing Misty Terrain as an option, it's looking more threatening as it is at this point, because while it didn't benefit Landorus and Celesteela a ton, it does help a lot on the other hand with stuff like Lucario and Serena, offensively speaking. So I actually love the pairing of Dragapult and Serena for this team. I think it really does make this a lot more threatening of a draft in my opinion.
Oh, 100%. Next up, we have Talonflame from DA. Giving him a little bit of speed because he did not have so up to this point. His fast Pokemon to this point was Mienshao, so getting Talonflame for that is really solid. Giving him a way to break through fat grasses for Drill is also really, really very much so appreciated, as well as another Fairy Resist. So he has plenty of Fairy Resist for the Hydreigon and G-Slowking, Excadrill, as well as the Talonflame. And while it may not be the same monster that it was in Gen 6 with that priority Gale Wings, it does have access to Boots now, which means it can guarantee to at least get off 1 Gale Wings hit, provided there are no, weather elements that are going to stop that, like sand or hail. Or just being Flame Body and passively, getting burns on, and punishing U-turns and, punishing your opponent for grabbing momentum. It can grab momentum itself. It can taunt. It can Swords Dance. It can bulk up. It can do a ton of things. I love Talonflame. It got Hurricane this gen, so Special is a little bit more viable. Like Flamethrower Hurricane sets, or I've even seen Overheat Talonflame do a lot of work because people, send in Fizz-Def Wall and then get blown ass backwards by it. So I actually really like Talonflame in that sense, and it gives Zeraora a good speed tier that he was lacking up to this point. Next up, we have Pangoro from Joe.
So Pangoro, I think actually is a pretty good option here. Weirdly enough, with the fighting spam, I don't actually think it's as bad because again, I feel like this is really turning into a Dragonite draft at this point. Weirdly enough, so the dual fighting to take on rocks and ice typing isn't as much of a detriment in my opinion. I think outside of that, though, the only other benefit I could see to Pangoro is the fact that it is a Ghost Switch in, which Joe did not have at this point, which should be helpful when considering the fact that Ghosts, at least, are unchecked on this team, and it's hurting Victini, obviously, as well as the fact that it's able to handle Psychics defensively speaking, which, while Vagabond can handle them offensively, doesn't really want to switch in on them. This is pretty appreciated for the Nidoqueen, Tentacruel, and the Victini at this point, so I don't know. I don't like that Joe's team had to rely on Pangoro, but I feel like it does at least help patch up a little bit of the misdrafting, I would argue, that Joe has had thus far. So I guess in that respect, at least it is an appreciated pick in my eyes.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Rotom-Mow for Tony, getting him a little bit of momentum with that Volt Switch option here, giving him another way of really beating down grounds outside of Gashon, which I think is definitely very, very important. Again, he's still struggling in the rocks aspect, but still a very solid Pokemon nonetheless. Again, like all the other Rotom forms, it spreads along a lot of status in Will-O-Wisp, Thunderwave, and Toxic. It can Nasty Plot up, and Thunderbolt plus Leaf Storm is a very potent combination, really allowing him to grab momentum incredibly easy as well with Volt Switch, because ground types aren't going to want to switch in and take that Leaf Storm and just drop. So great momentum grabber and great facilitator of his pretty solid top 3 in offense. Again, I just really want him to grab more rocks, because right now he's really hurting in that aspect. Next up, speaking of rockers, we have a phenomenal low tier rocker in Stunfisk. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, sure. So Stunfisk actually I think was one of those like really missing pieces to this draft. Considering the fact that Stunfisk is obviously a really good electric switch in, which is really useful when considering the fact that Crocodile might not necessarily always want to be the electric check defensively, and it would prefer in some cases to be a Scarfer. So having Stunfisk for that role for maybe matchups like a Raikou or a Koko could actually be really appreciated here. It's a second rocker too, which again is really nice to take some pressure off of Crook, especially when stuff like the Steel type being Aegislash that doesn't get rocks is really appreciated here. Static support with Stunfisk could be really nice for stuff like Urshifu and Crook offensively late game if they don't want to necessarily run Scarf. So I think a Stunfisk actually does, weirdly enough, fill a lot of holes in this team, despite maybe on paper seeming a bit repetitive. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Dr. Slacking can do with that.
Goat Fist for sure. I love Stunfisk. It's so anti-meta. It beats so many top tier threats in the metagame for such a great price. So I love this Pokemon. Next up though, we have Liv and her Alolan Ninetales. That's not a stall Pokemon, but it does set Hail and potentially Aurora Veil for the rest of the team, which is definitely really nice. It has cool options actually for stall builds like Pain Split, which I didn't know it had before, for pseudo reliable recovery, as well as chipping down opposing threats, as well as Safeguard, which I think is a really, really clutch aspect of it, deterring any kind of status. If something like Blissey is low or something like that, and it can't be that status absorber at that point, or it's a physical status spreader, or it's Unaware Clef or something like that game, or anything like that. It can also nasty plot up, but really it's here to set up Hail and set up Veil for the rest of the team. It can also facilitate like Specs, Blizzard, Kyurem sets, which I've definitely seen like OU teams, like, you know, Ice Spam with like Ninetales, Kyurem, and then another Ice type or something like that. And then like Specs, Blizzard, as well as Freeze Dry. Really being able to push through a lot of teams. Not a lot of things want to switch into that. And another thing I think is really valuable in having Hail on a stall build like this is the passive damage that it forces on the opposing team, making it take that Hail chip every single turn in conjunction with hazards, and the passive damage that you're doing from like your Seismic Toss to your attacks, as well as status and things like that. So I actually think that's a very solid aspect of this team, and I think that's why you see like Sandstall all the time. This is just same thing but with Hail, which is nice from Ninetales.
Yeah, I told you I was drafting HO.
Exactly. You guys set the Veil for your Calm Mind weakness policy, Blissey.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Next up, we have Owen's pick here of Inteleon. So Inteleon I think is a cool option here. Obviously we have the defensive water role already filled up in Jellicent, so having an offensive one that could maybe potentially pressure stuff like opposing grounds for Heatran, or a rock types that might be threatening Scolipede, especially when the steel type is not a resist, so at least having the offensive option around stuff like Lycanroc is pretty clutch. Ultimately, I like Inteleon here. I'm not the biggest fan of it as a Pokemon, but I think for 10 points, and the fact that it offers Owen as well an upper speed tier that he currently lacked, since Scolipede's speed tier might not always be respected because of speed boost, I do actually think it's a pretty good pick here, in my opinion. Is it the Pokemon I think that maybe would benefit the most upper speed-wise in this draft? Not necessarily, but I think it's definitely at least up there. And I'm curious to see how Owen does with it, because I think it's a Pokemon that, similarly to Pokemon like Celebi, or even other Pokemon that we've mentioned thus far, like Braviary, it is a little bit underexplored. So I'm curious to see what he does.
Big Agent Leon. Next up, we have round 8 Clefairy, not round 6, so a bit of a steal here from Kaz, but he grabs this Fairy type here. A Rocks user, a knockoff abuser. It can Baton Pass around. I don't believe it can teleport as easily, right? It can't run softball with teleport, or can it?
It cannot run softball with teleport, but it can. Yeah. It's so slow enough to where it's basically teleporting with Baton Pass.
Exactly. So it's not that big of a deal, to be completely honest. And again, really helping out his defensive core. Again, his defensive core doesn't appreciate the move knockoff, but no defensive core really does. You know, that's why the move is so valuable in facilitating and knocking off items and taking away recovery or taking away bulk and things like that. And having your Fairy type not be able to switch into knockoff is a bit unfortunate. Puts a little bit more pressure on things like Reuniclus and Toxapex, but those Pokemon are meant to have pressure put on them because they're so good defensively at what they do. So it's not the biggest deal in the world, and at least gives him an Urshifu matchup where he doesn't just lose to Band, which I think is really, really important if he does end up playing T-Row or something like that. And again, another rocker, good low point Fairy, and again, there's not that many left, so pretty good pickup here by Kaz. Next up, we have Aquarius and Grimmsnarl.
So Grimmsnarl here, I'm not huge on it, but at the same time, I can kind of get what it can offer here. Obviously, it's another Ghost Switch in, as well as another Psychic Check to maybe take some pressure off of the other Pokemon. The screen support is also really appreciated with stuff like Lottie and Scizor, maybe more offensive setup variants. Also, even something like a Curselax could go wild with this. I'm not huge on Grimmsnarl just in draft personally, though. I think it's just not the best, in my opinion. But I do think that, to be fair, the team has some options to make it work. Stuff like maybe wish Lottie to get some recovery back in this, or as I said, the other setup abusers. So I think it can definitely work here. Just not the biggest fan of Grimm is all. I just don't think it really performs for the cost value, is my opinion.
No, I feel you. Next up, we have Throw here from Keegan. Really solid low tier fighting, in all honesty. Gives him a good knock pivot as well. Outside of something like Diancie, which is great. This thing can be really annoying with, like, you know, set up bulk up sets, and I believe it's Circle Throw, right? That's the move it uses.
Yes.
As well as Guts variants, and actually being a good low tier breaker. I've seen Amel actually do really well with like Flame Orb, Guts, Throw, really just throwing off big hits and being a big nuisance. AV isn't a bad option either, with this thing's pretty solid natural bulk, especially in conjunction with that Assault Vest. So good low tier pick, especially because he was so top heavy and he spent a lot of points early on and torn through Hippo. I think he's done a pretty good job at picking up low tier threats that are, you know, still very functional to his team and what his team needs. So solid pickup here by Keegan. Next up, we have Amel and Matang.
Yes. I'm giving his Pokemon 5 seconds. It's a Steel type and it's a Rocker. That's all Amel gets with this. This
Bam.
is just, yeah, that's it.
Wheezing here from Kurt. He grabs his Grounded Poison. The option to be a Grounded Poison this gen, obviously, and being able to be neutralizing gas, as well as Levitate as a very solid option as well. A T-Spike setter, which things like Mew, Rillaboom, and Zygarde freaking love, which I think is really great. It gives him a solid fighting, resist, and check outside of Mew. Again, opening it up a little bit to where he can be a more offensive Mew in certain matchups if he has something like Weezing that can come in and sponge close combats and knockoffs and things like that, which, excuse me, definitely very, very solid. So I think this is a solid low tier pickup here for Kurt, and it checked a lot of boxes for him. Next up, we have Uxie from Jesse504.
Uxie's a pretty good option here in my eyes. I think the fact that it's immune to ground types is really useful with Zama and Chandelure, and it's one that can actually switch in on grounds pretty consistently on like maybe a Thundurus. On top of that as well, this is another rocker for Jesse's team, which is really useful when considering the fact that his only other rockers so far were Chansey and Mamoswine. So I appreciate that pick a lot. The Mentor support could also be really threatening actually with how much setup that Jesse actually has. Because while maybe let's say like a Thundurus or Zarude aren't going to be setting up every week, this definitely does make it a lot more potentially possible for Jesse to actually do that. So I'm personally really huge on this pick actually. I think it offers him a ton.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Audino for Tiro, which I think offers a ton to his team. Speaking of things that offer a ton. Giving another regen Mom with Tangrowth, giving him a nice solid regen core. Being able to wish up things like Swampert, Bronzong, Rotom is incredibly valuable, as well as giving him a Cleric outside of Comfey. So Comfey could do so, but not the biggest deal. It's good to have multiple of them, and I think Audino is a little bit more reliable in doing so. It spreads knockoffs, it spreads Thunder Waves and Toxic. It's incredibly passive offensively, but it really is a phenomenal pivot and a great way of keeping his really fat, balanced, bulky offense team healthy and ready to fight and go. So good pickup by Tiro here. Next up, we have Delmise.
So, Delmise, weirdly enough, I think is actually another momentum sponge that Hayes drafted, in my opinion. Considering the fact that I'm assuming this pick was probably meant to be Decidueye, if I had to guess.
Oh, sure.
Maybe it wasn't, to be fair, because to Hayes' credit, he does at the very least have only a couple, well, I guess whether credit or not otherwise is debatable, but Hayes only has a couple hazard setters right now, one of them being the Registeel we already kind of gave a bit of flock to. So maybe the spinner was intentional here. Instead of the defog that Decidueye would have offered. But I'm assuming that just the momentum that Decidueye would have gained in the lower speed, that was probably the case. Regardless though, this is still a really good ground switch in as a backup to Togekiss. While Togekiss didn't necessarily get threatened by many grounds, this is just an option, especially when Zygarde could potentially end up at least putting a bit of pressure on that as a soul check. So having a secondary option is nice, especially when Dragonite Zygarde kind of rails the team if it does ever manage to get a +1 off, especially with E-Speed to not necessarily risk the Scarfed on.
Oh, 100%. Great Pokemon. Okay, next up, we have a Selgor here from Sally Mobile, giving him an elite speed tier in, well, I forget exactly what it is, but I know it's above 140, it might be 145. Also giving Spikes, which is a great option. Spikes and Gambit. Things like Landorus and Komodo really do appreciate that Spike support. Wearing down teams to where they can clean through them later. Even Scarfrachi really appreciates it. Pokemon coming in, taking 2 strikes in that Iron Head or that U-turn, and then, potentially being in 2 or 3 hit KO range a little bit later, maybe like Iron Head or Zen Headbutt. So really solid option, good at what it does, sets up spikes. It can be offensive in some matches like Throat Sway, Bug Buzz, gets Focus Blast for Steel type, so it could definitely be solid offensively too. It doesn't just, set up spikes and die. Next up, we have Sneasel from Sally Mobile, giving him his Dark type. Again, he really does struggle with Ghost potentially with this as his Dark type, but he does have Porygon. I personally am of the opinion that Porygon is very exploitable within the move Taunt, Knockoff, and Trick, especially from Ghost, really being able to punish it in that sense. But Sneasel is a good offensive way of revenging them with 115 as its speed tier. It's going to outspeed a majority of them and knock them out with a knockoff, which is definitely great. And again, Porygon 2 can still pivot and take the hits defensively. So he should be able to navigate them around well if he does so. Gives him priority in Ice Shard and a potential Swords Dance Sweeper. Good with Boots, Band, Life Orb. Probably not Eviolite, but very solid low tier Pokemon nonetheless. And it gives him a solid little gap, or it fills that gap between like a Selgor and Landorus. So he had a really big gap in between those, so he at least has something at 115. Maybe something at 110 would be pretty nice, but not the biggest deal in the world if he doesn't. He's kind of covered the big main jumps he wants to. Next up, go ahead, talk about it.
Honestly, I don't like Lecky. I've definitely gotten a lot more sour on it through the generation. I still think it's at least better than Raichu, but I mean, more so reflecting on our tiers, less so on a Lecky. But a Lecky, I will say, I'm gonna give it one thing, and that's the fact that Hayes' team really does a really good job of punishing potential ground types. That's all I'm gonna give it. This makes me believe even more that maybe that pick was intended to be Decidueye, considering the fact that this could just be the spinner right here if Hayes really wanted it to.
Sure.
So that's pretty much all I'll give Lecky, though. I'm not huge on it in general.
Now this is a good. This is a good Pokemon. This is a good Pokemon. Actually giving Tiro a lot more offense, which I think is really important because his team started off with that really potent offensive core. Rodent can be offensive, and then his team has been incredibly balanced and like really forming that really solid defensive core. But Salamence really does give that offensive option of being that D-Dance sweeper. Being a specially offensive option, being Scarf Moxie, which is all great, as well as still functioning defensively and being able to be fat and roost with like Toxic, and it got Hurricane as well as Air Slash this gen. It can Flamethrower through the different steel types. It can Toxic things down. It can Wish as well. Wishman's is the GOAT. So honestly, a really versatile Pokemon, but more so I think on this team it'll function in a really offensive manner and give Tiro a little bit more firepower when it comes to his team here, because his fat balanced defensive backbone is great. Just a little bit more offense would have been great, and this is the pickup that he really needed in my opinion. Next up we have Dragalge for Jesse 504.
So Dragalge here, I think if anything was a really nice option as a backup killer to fairies, which while we do have Zamazenta at least to pressure them offensively speaking, it can't be the only one considering the fact that it is neutral. I will say that this does show that Jesse's team has no fairy resist at all outside of Chandelure, which is a little bit alarming, but to be fair, when your offensive responses are Zamazenta and Dragalge, I don't think it's the biggest deal personally.
And they can naturally sponge them.
Yeah, exactly. They can naturally sponge. I will say though, that Jesse actually only has like 3 points left over at this point in the draft, so it's going to be interesting to see what he actually picks up here, because while I think that another fairy switching could be a little bit appreciated, I don't know what he actually needs at this point. So I'm kind of just curious to see what he picks, because this team as itself, despite, again, missing a few key resistances, honestly, it's still a pretty guaranteed playoff team in my eyes.
It has great bulk to back it up. Like, it doesn't necessarily have those resistances, but again, like, especially offensive fairies aren't going to do well against Chansey, Dragalge. And then he has Zama to switch into physically offensive ones.
Yeah, exactly. Like what actually breaks this team in my eyes? Like I can't think of anything.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Blastoise from Kurt, grabbing his bulky water finally and grabbing a good rapid spinner, which is great. His defog up to this point was, I don't know if Gmol gets it. I don't remember. Maybe Mew. So he didn't have great removal regardless of the fact, even if those two get it, you probably don't want to run on them very often. So rapid spin is great for Blastoise. It can flip, turn around. It can also shell smash and win 3 games this game, and I think a cool option with this thing would be potentially Terrain Pulse with like a Terrain Extender, Rillaboom catching some water types off guard, nuking them with basically a +2 energy ball in the terrain, which is really a cool option, and has good niche offensive matchups, but really is going to be that bread and butter defensive water that's going to rapid spin, flip turn, passive damage with Scald and Toxic, and Ice Beam grasses and things like that in Dragons. So very solid pickup here by Kurt. Next up, we have Whiscash.
For Animal's team, this is definitely a better pick, I will say, than at least Metang somehow.
It's
go. A ground type, which is actually kind of good for Animal, because he had no electric switch and has had a Lilliant and Dedenne, I guess. The fact that this only has 1 weakness in its grass, he does Patras pretty well. It's still a Drapion and Entei. As I said, I hate to say it, but for a team as shit as Animals, he really has good food. Literally, my only gripe is the fact that he didn't just try and hazard stack everything and then win with Entei. But to each their own, he still has some good hazards with 2 Rockers and T-Spike Drapion. So
yeah, and Whiscash is going to be the win con. He's setting up DDs in your face and he's winning. Next up, we have Roselia. Giving, what do you call it, Keegan a very solid spiker. He didn't have spikes at this point, giving him ground and poison. I will say he does not have a ground resist up to this point, which can be very scary. He does have great Fizz-Def walls and Slowbro and Hippowdon, and a good Spadef wall and something like Roselia, but maybe a mixed attacking ground type could be very scary, or just Banded Earthquakes could be very scary in conjunction with hazards for his team, because again, he does not have a ground resist, and I don't envision him picking up a grass type when he already has Cortana Roselia, so I don't envision another one. So I think that's something to keep in mind with his team. Again, he doesn't auto-lose them. He has Torn, Slowbro, Hippowdon, but not having a resist can be very scary for sure. And Other than that, though, I think that Roselia does tick off other boxes and spikes, grounded poison, and good low tier value. Next up, we have Zygarde 10%. You want to talk about this one? I haven't seen this one draft in it feels like years.
Yeah, I'll be completely honest. I think this was just drafted just to get it some action because it's been on the bench for about 7-8 years. And I realized that this has only been a Pokemon for like 4 or 5, but it's been on the bench for about 6 or 7. Zygarde's pretty terrible, I won't lie. I don't think it's good at all. For 10 points, I think it's actually really criminally overpriced. Terrible Pokemon. I cannot give it any respect, actually. The only thing I could see this doing for Aquarius' team is giving something faster than Latias. That's really it. I'm not giving it anything else. You cannot make me.
Yeah, it's an interesting Pokemon. I like Big Zygarde, and I like dogs. This one looks cool. I'll give it that.
Like Zygarde 10.
Oh, I'll talk about, speaking of Chad Dragon types, we have Big Tyrantrum here from Cass. Actually, another rocker, which is pretty nice because this rockers are just fun. But Ferrothorn, very reliable. Clefairy, not coming to every matchup. And now Tyrantrum, so at least gives him another option, even if it's, again, another option that's not going to come to a lot of matchups. Another really, really scary Pokemon offensively, not with just Dragon Dance sets, but even Rock Polish sets, or even just Scarf or Band variants with Head Smash, Earthquake, and Dragon Move. Really, really scary and hard to switch into. I believe it got close combat this gen as well, because I think Tyrant did, didn't it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did. As well as Flare Up, so it got some cool new options offensively as well. And again, I've actually seen this thing function well defensively. This isn't standard, but I remember one time in Ubers League I used this. It was AP Academy Season 2. I used, like, defensive rest, talk Tyrantrum to check a Ho-Oh. So, like, Fizz-Def wise, it actually has decent bulk. It can take Earthquakes very well, and it's a good, like, fire resist and things like that for his team. Maybe take a little bit of pressure off Peck, so I don't expect he'll ever need to use it in that role. Just something to keep in mind, something that it can do. And really solid breaker and even win con in specific matchups. Next up is my Thundy-T.
Yes, so I will say, I like the Thundurus-T a lot here, actually. Thundurus is a really strong option in terms of punishing waters, which right now, as I said, while Jellicent is an immunity, as I've already established, and the fact that Celebi can switch in, just having the option, since neither of those are Pokemon that can really come every week, whereas Thundurus could definitely come every week, in my opinion. So having that upper option is really nice when considering Pokemon like Garchomp and Heatran on the upper echelon of Pokemon for Owen's roster. This does leave Owen with basically no points, just like with Jesse, he only has like 3 left. So it'll be interesting to see how he rounds this out. Again, though, just like with Jesse's team, I can't really see much that Owen's team necessarily needs at this point. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he gets with these last couple picks, or last pick, depending on how he uses his points.
Next up, we have Liv picking up Skuntank, giving her a dark type, giving her a grounded poison, which is also very important with Stall, making sure that T-Spikes don't just ruin you outside of you just being able to remove them, because that can be stopped, obviously. There's only a couple removers on this team, Skarmy and Starmie, which can be stopped potentially. So having a way to eliminate those entirely is really important, so you're not forced to run boots or defog them away. It can even nasty plot or life orb through a lot of teams. It's actually really slept on offensively, in my opinion, and decently solid on a build like this as like a low point, grounded poison and dark type that might come to a couple matchups to patch a few holes in specific scenarios and things like that. So pretty solid pickup here for Liv. Next up, we have Toxtricity for Dr. Slacking.
The Toxtricity here, I think, is really nice, considering the fact this is like an outright breaker on the team to maybe stop the dependency on Volcanion and Lottie from filling that role. It's also a really good slower pivot, since, again, right now the only pivots are... Well, actually, Braviary is a slower pivot, so I should take that back. The grounded poison could still be really appreciated, though, with stuff like Urshifu Rapid and Crocodile maybe not necessarily wanting to take on T-Spikes. So I do think this is pretty useful, especially when the defog options are Whimsicott, Lottie, and Braviary, and all 3 of them, I would argue, have really bad form move slot. Actually, Volcanion too. But Volcanion is probably somehow the one that I think could fit defog on the easiest of those, though at the same time it has you. But it'll be interesting. I do think this, if nothing else, takes away some of the dependency on clicking defog, if nothing else, just because it can remove those T-Spikes. So we'll have to see what happens.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Nihilego from Tony Rocks. We got some Stealth Rock here, baby. We also got a grounded poison, which is really nice when you have, things like Gastron, Aromatisse, Necrozma. So I think that's definitely very important. Meteor Beam through teams as well as another option. Getting that +1 and then just cleaving through teams. And, you could be speed boosting. It has great coverage in Grass Knot, Thunderbolt, Sludge Wave, and Power Gem, obviously. Cool things like that. It can even foul play in Thunder Wave. So cool utility options. T-Spike setter in its own right. Very solid Pokemon here for Tony. I think this was a great pickup. And a great speed tier for him as well. I think he went from Weavile down to Silvally. So this was a good Mon around 100 for him as well. So good pickup by Tony.
Sure.
Next up, we have Frostlass here for
Finally,
Joe.
more hazards for Joe. Oh my god. I am so glad that he finally got another damaging hazard setter that is not just T-Spikes, considering somehow Joe's most common hazard at this point is T-Spikes, which it's not bad, but that should not be the most common hazard on a team. I'm just going to put it out there for anyone who might be wondering for draft advice. It should not be your most common hazard. I'll just say it. Frostlass is still really good though. This is a really good way to at least punish, for example, maybe opposing grass types. If, let's say, Dragonite or Victini don't want to, really sure how necessary that'll be. But I think more importantly what this offers though is a good way to punish ground, considering how much of a ground weakness Joe has built up for a team that has Koko as the first pick. It's kind of alarming, I won't lie, but the fact that Frostlass is here does actually help that a lot. Also, this is a really good option offensively speaking with the Ghost typing. Ghost Ice is such a disgusting offensive type. I think this is actually a really amazing pick for Joe's team. I know I've definitely thrown a couple of his picks under the bus, but this was a really good one, I think, for his draft. Insanely vital Koko, in my opinion.
100%. Next up, we have Deer grabbing Rotom Frost. Very interesting pickup here, but a good way to break through fat waters for his team. Again, things like Extra Joe really do appreciate it, though he does have things like Decidueye. But really, that's honestly it. That's a reliable way of breaking through waters. And if he's, a physical variant, he might not want to switch in on Skulls and things like that. So Rotom's going to be very solid in that, right? Another Rotom form that spreads status and is very easy to full switch around with because the fact that grounds don't want to take Blizzards or Will-O-Wisps. So that's really solid. You do obviously have to play the game of hitting Blizzard, but if you do, Bolt Beam coverage stab combination is going to be really, really potent for a lot of teams to deal with. I wish this Pokemon got Ice Beam instead. Unfortunately, it doesn't, but it's still very solid enough Pokemon nonetheless, and it breaks through those waters a little bit for him, which is nice. Next up, we have Kang from Pat Mac.
Yes, so one of the big things I really love about the Kangaskhan pick here, well, there's two things I really like about it. One is the fact that this is a Ghost Switch in, because Pat Mac currently had nothing for, let's say, like a Specs Gengar Shadow Ball. It really just claimed to kill every time it went in. But Kang is actually, for a budget normal, a really consistent switch into this. This also, more importantly, though, gives Pat Mac a really good Wish Passer, which, as we mentioned earlier, is really vital with something like a Celesteela, and it's really appreciated, too, with other Pokemon like Landorus and Weezingale. So I think this Kang, actually, truthfully, is such an amazing pick for Pat Mac, and I think it really does allow for Pat Mac to actually take advantage of his next pick being his round 10 Pokemon, Blacephalon. Having a Ghost Switch in to help with the Gengar matchup is huge, especially when you have Blacephalon, which, even if it is a Scarf set, will just be outslowed by Scarf Gengar. Which, to be fair, I will say, at least forcing Scarf Gengar is something when the only switch-in so far to Ghost-type opponents would be Kangaskhan, because while it is a good switch-in, it's not going to be a perfect one. So having Blacephalon is extremely valuable for that. It's also a really good option to punish Steals, because currently, offensively speaking, the only other ones... Well, actually, never mind. There's actually a lot of good options for Steals. Point being, though, this is a really good special breaker. It takes a little bit of the pressure off of Raikou, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Pat Mac can do with this.
Oh, for sure. Next up for DA, we have a Stoutland. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this pick. I understand why he drafted. I understand, as you could probably guess, he's probably going to go Sand with his last pick. There's not really any other Sand teams, and unlike other leagues, people don't just draft Sand to stop people from getting Sand. But D-Ray is probably going to get his Gigalith in the last round. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Stoutland, though, especially in Generation 8. I feel like this Pokemon's honestly a Trapmon. Not very good in Sand. He already has a normal type, so he doesn't need it for the Ghost immunity, and it kind of just seems shoehorned on. It's a Pokemon that looks great on paper sometimes, and you're like, wow, Stoutland does great, and then you won't ever bring it to a game. I've drafted Stoutland 4 times, I brought it into 2 games, and it fucking sucked in both of them. So I'm a big Stoutland hater. As much as I love my Dogmons, this one's not a very good one. It seems a little bit shoehorned on. Maybe there just wasn't anything more valuable at the price point, and he wanted to force the prep, and if that's the case, then that's fair. But yeah, I'd really have to look at the board to say, whether or not I really agree with this pick or not, but I see why he's getting it, because he's going to get Sand with his next pick. It's pretty obvious to see so that he drafted Stoutland round 10. Next up, we have Porygon Z.
Yes, I will say, this is another really good pick by Joe, and I love the fact that if nothing else, while I don't necessarily think the Vikavolt pick was that good, I do think at least he's drafting other Pokemon that are making it a little less invaluable, if nothing else. Because at least Porygon Z is an amazing web user, and with Victini, Porygon Z, and webs, this actually could be a really hard team to prep for. As I said, while the synergy isn't necessarily there, if nothing else, there are definitely routes that Joe can go in any given week to really make this work. Now, do I think that Joe could have maybe went with a cheaper web option like Shuckle, which was still around at this point? Yeah, sure. I think it could have worked, or even maybe like a 1-point web spawn, or even a charge bug if you really wanted webs that bad. But I will say though, he's making the most of. The Porygon Z Victini core, if nothing else, is extremely terrifying to switch on, with Victini killing steals for it, and Porygon Z just breaking everything to allow for maybe more physical Victini routes. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with this team.
Oh yeah, for sure. Sorry, I was responding to someone in coach chat. That OGalbina is super cute. Kaz, oh, I appreciate it. Next up, we got Magmortar. While I stop blushing really quick. Tony picking up Mag here. Really, I'm trying to look. A solid way of breaking through steals potentially for his build, and again, I know he's running low on points and things like that. Boot's making this thing a little bit more viable this gen, and really is a solid wall breaker in specific matchups. I know it got teleport this gen, which is a cool niche option for it. It can flame body cheese some things down, maybe pass off some wisps, even belly jump through some teams with Mach Punch as priority, or flame charge up in its own right and be faster than everything. So it has its clean niche options. Not the best Pokemon in the world, but nothing too crazy. Let's go ahead and keep on zooming through. We have round 10 Shelmet.
Yeah, so I will say really quickly before I get into the Shelmet pick, this is Tony's last pick of the draft, actually. And if you want to see Tony's perspective on the draft, make sure to check him out here. His link should be popping up in the chat any moment now. His draft analysis will be going up at some point, 3 o'clock or later, just like the rest of our coaches. Now, onto the Shelmet pick, though. I do think the Shelmet pick for Dr. Slacking is actually incredible. Shelmet is a really good spike option, and it's a really cheap one for 1.2. This is a Pokemon that's just in general going to offer some actual momentum, which a lot of 1-point spikers wouldn't necessarily do because of the Dry Baton Pass, and it is slow, so it is basically functioning like a teleport for Dr. Slacking. It has reliable recovery, which again, a lot of 1-point mons that offer as much utility-wise as Shelmet do can't necessarily say the same thing. So this pick actually for 1 point, I think is amazing for Dr.
Oh,
Slacking.
for sure. And it gives him that spike option, which he didn't have up to this point. So in this specific matchup where someone has really shitty removal or something like that, it can actually be pretty clutch. Next up, we have Liv grabbing the Trevenant. Another status is over with Natural Cure, which I actually didn't know pre-draft that this thing had Nat Cure. I just know like cheesy harvest sets, which can always be fun, to be completely fair. But this thing is a good ground resist. It's also a spin blocker, which Liv didn't have. And again, it's a little bit more of a budget one, but it's good to have one in general when you have things like Scarm, potentially stacking hazards, as well as great rockers like Scarm, Blissey, Rhyperior, Clef, really setting up those hazards. And again, having more Scald Switch and having more status absorbers is always great for a team like this. This is a stall team that really just does not give a shit about status whatsoever, which I think a good stall build should probably be able to combat status and toxics and things like that. So that's definitely very solid. It's a very budget option, but she's also not necessarily weak to ground because of things like Scarm, really being able to sponge and take those hits, as well as Buzzwole. So it wasn't even necessarily required. I think it's really only here because it fits that role as well as multiple other roles for her team, which is great. Next up is Big Munch.
Yes, so we have Munchlax coming in next from Owen. Honestly, really good backup ghost check. As I did mention, Owen's team didn't really have much besides a Scrafty, as I did mention when the Scrafty pick came up. So having a Munchlax is a really good, actually, budget ghost switch in. Not only that, but this is weirdly enough able to actually kind of snowball with curse sets in some matchups. So depending on the opponent's team, this could end up actually running wild. If nothing else, though, I mean, it's good for thick fat with options like the ice checking softly for Garchomp, which is really appreciated for it. Again, not the best Pokemon, but Owen only had like 3 points to work with, so I think for a 2-point Munchlax, this is a pretty good pick.
Oh, no, for sure. Next up, though, we have Kaz with his last pick of this draft in Piloswine, a really, really reliable rocker as well, which is great because I know we mentioned that there are 3 rockers on this team, right? There's Clefairy, Tyrantrum. One, Tyrantrum's not going to run a rock every week, as well as Clef isn't going to come every week, that's for sure. So seeing a little bit of pressure off that Ferrothorn in a rocking sense is really clutch. Having that solid ground type as well to absorb Volt Switches outside of Zera, taking a little bit of pressure off that thing because, you know, you get caught with the wrong move on Zera, you're potentially 2-hit KO, and you're in a tough spot. So I definitely think this is a solid pickup, and it's really reliable at what it does. Oblivious is a great option, not only for Intims, but as well as not being taunted and reliably getting up those rocks. And then Thick Fat basically making this thing not be weak to fire and resist ice, which is also, again, really, really clutch when your Steel type doesn't resist ice. Toxapex does, but obviously Freeze Dry is a thing and things like that. So it takes a little pressure off Volk and things like that. So really solid low tier, what do you call it? Low tier ground type. Yeah, sorry, it's been a long stream. If you do want to check out Kaz, though, his link was just linked by Liv right there with exclamation point Magmars. Go check him out. I believe his draft analysis will also be up at noon. Go show some support and check him out for the rest of the season with this really, really fat and disgusting team with still some fun offensive options like Zera, Volk, and what do you call it? Gzap. And big base Tyrantrum, which is always a fun mon to use.
course.
Next up, we have...
Oh,
Oh
we skipped
no,
a bit.
right at the end. Are you kidding me? We were so close.
Oh, no.
Okay,
All right,
so
well,
I gotta
guess
do
we'll
it again.
An NCP plug.
There
Guess
we
we'll
go.
do an NCP plug. If you haven't already and you want to keep an eye on every one of the coaches, make sure you join the NCP server. The NCP server is the quickest and most convenient way for you to stay up to date with all your favorite coaches, as well as a very quick way to show your coaches who you're supporting this season. If you want to pick up a role for the Miami Bents or the New Orleans Noivern or the Ann Arbor Selgors, you can grab it in the NCP server. Stay up to date with all of your favorite coaches' uploads for the NCP season, whether it's a battle, draft analysis, whatever it ends up being. And it's the best way to just have a good time. Now, with next pick, we do have the Strength Saps, which this is their also last pick. We actually have a few last picks coming right up. So this is Aquarius' last pick of the draft with Sharpedo. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I do like what Sharpedo can definitely do here. Similar to the Inteleon for Owen, we do have the Sharpedo, which is at the very least able to go for a very fast and offensive water type here, which is cool. I will say, to be fair, unlike Grimmsnarl pick, well, actually, unlike with the Zodag pick, I should say, I do think that at this point in the draft, there wasn't really much else for like the 8 points that offered a lot to this team. Question, should this be a Politoed? I do actually think this should have been a Politoed.
A Politoed would be kind of sick. I like the Rain Flex option. I do like the Rain Flex option with the top like 5
Pokemon that offered anything more for the rough point range than Sharpedo did personally. Because as I mentioned, for the first 5 picks, Rain would have been amazing here. And I do think the Sharpedo does miss that opportunity a little bit. To be fair, you could also drop Zodag though, and I think it's Zodag for Politoed and then Sharpedo for literally anything else with those extra 10 points would be amazing, just, you know, while you're dropping Pokemon anyway. But even still without that, I do think that the Politoed would have been a really good opportunity here, and I think it was a little bit missed. But hey, maybe there is something that we're missing here, and if you want to check out Aquarius' side, of course, we do have Aquarius' link, which was just linked above. Feel free to check out their draft analysis when it goes live at some point, 3 p.m. EST or later.
I want to see that rough skin helmet, Sharpedo. I almost said Chomp, same thing. Next up, we have a round 10 Corviknight, by the way. There's a round 10 Corviknight here for Keegan, allowing him to have that really bulky steel option instead of Cart, which is great. U-turn bot, so even more momentum in conjunction with Torn, Slowbro, Cinderace, really getting in, you know, big threats like the big Zolt, Kartana, Cinderace to keep up the momentum, Torn to keep up the momentum, which is great, and overall a really solid Pokemon. Again, a U-turn bot, if it's a lot like Mandy, if you're not clicking Roost or U-turn, you're probably not playing it right, but it does what it does so well, and it really, again, round 10 Corvi is going to be really solid. Is this Keegan's last pick?
Yes, this is also Keegan's last pick. So if you want to check out Keegan's perspective, I think it's actually Flygon's. Oh, no, it was Flygon. Okay.
It's Flygon, yeah.
If you want to check out Keegan's last pick, feel free to, of course, if you want to see his perspective on his draft, his battles, etc., go and check out Keegan's link. This is his first league of the entire generation, so it'd be great if you could show him some support.
Damn it. Bam! Porygon! I should have drafted this shit instead of Munchlax. Alright, go ahead. Talk about Porygon.
Yes. So, Emil got Porygon. It's just better Munchlax. Cheaper, has actual reliable recovery, kind of a demon. This is the Brazilian mascot, so you know, for April 1st, this is Brazilian Day in the BBL server, so I gotta show my rep where I can. Long live Brazil. But Porygon's an amazing Pokemon, truthfully. I think for 1 point, this is like a criminally underrated Pokemon. This is really one of those Pokemon I think that has gotten a lot more spotlight lately, and I think it's well deserved, personally. So I'm just looking forward to seeing Emil get like 10 Porygon sweeps. He's got to do it for Burgo, you know, show the BBL rep.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Wigglytuff, Kurt grabbing his Fairy, grabbing his Ghost Immunity all in one, as well as grabbing, honestly, a decently solid Wish Passer. I really do like this Pokemon a lot. I know a lot of people shit on Wiggles, but I think it's really good for his price point. Being a great Pult check, too, which his team just got fucking smashed by Pult. Well, not a great Pult check, giving him a Pult check in general, which, again, he got smashed by it, which is really solid for him in my personal opinion. Again, passes wishes, it can be competitive. It also gives him another rocker, which is another slept-on aspect of this Pokemon. Has that Gen 1 move pool. Solid Pokemon for the price point that it is, and the, you know, the, what do you call it that he has? Very solid. So, next up, we have Jesse 504 in Bastion.
504 with the Bastions. This is Jesse 504's last pick, actually. So if you want to check out the Selgors and Jesse 504, feel free to check him out. Of course, his link is coming up on screen in the chat at any moment. With the Bastion, I will say, as I said earlier, Jesse did not need anything else.
So just having the offensive water, I guess, if nothing else, is kind of clutch for opposing fires and grounds for Zamazenta. It's a cool momentum option and has good priority with Aqua Jet, of course. At that point, honestly, just get whatever you want. So if Jesse likes Basculin, go Basculin. I threw on the blue one though; it doesn't get enough love, and it's the cooler form. So
Dude, he's just getting ready for big base Basculegion coming into the game. He's got to get some experience with this one before. Next up, though, we have Big Golisopod from Tiro. Amon, I absolutely love to use it having spikes as well as boots this generation. I think boots are really saving grace and make it a lot more viable than it used to be in draft. Allowing it to switch in consistently, sponge up maybe a hit because this thing's bulk is actually ridiculous, and stay above half and really throw off big hits, get up a spike, Aqua Jet, First Impression, and Sucker Punch all for priority. You can even Swords Dance. But another slept on aspect of Golisopod, I think, is its ability to put itself in first emergency exit range and use it as a free pivot out, almost like an eject button, which I think is a really solid aspect of it. So this Pokemon, in the hands of a smart player and a smart builder, can actually be really, really solid and really tough to deal with. So I think this is a great pickup for him. And again, it gives him spikes too, which is really solid for things like Urshifu, Gengar, and Ment. So really solid option. Again, like a low tier offense option too, which is really cool. He has another pick though, so we'll be back to Tiro. Next up, we do have Hayes' final pick in Type Null.
Yes, so Hayes' final pick in Type Null. Type Null, personally, I love this generation. I love it in general. Type Null is just such a great Pokemon, and I don't think it gets enough respect, in my personal opinion. Type Null is one of those really bulky normal types that can honestly just sit on everything, and I do mean everything that is in front of it. Even opposing fighting types, this can soft take hits from, I should say. Like, it is truly a demon how well this Pokemon just sits and sits and sits on the opponent. So if you want to check out Hayes' draft and his perspective, it might already be live. It might not be. You don't know that unless you've checked out his channel.
We're just about there. Oh man, we are just about there.
We're just about there.
So we'll go on to Sally Mumble and his Tauros right here. Picking up the mascot, honestly, such a fun mon. He already has the bulky normal in Porygon, so I don't think it's too bad that he has, you know, like a not ghost resist normal. This Pokemon is so much fun to use though. Base 110 speed tier. Really a great low tier breaker, and a lot of the times people just won't have counterplay for either just physically offensive Tauros with Body Slam, Close Combat, Earthquake, all that fun stuff. But even mixed Tauros, if you have that Ferrothorn as your normal resist and you get blown ass backwards by a sheer force Life Orb, Fire Blast, or something like that. Scarf Tauros is a solid revenge killer in some matchups. This Pokemon is a lot of fun. I really do enjoy using it. And then for his last pick, he has Shedinja. Nice 1-point mon, I suppose. It forces prep, which I think is really important as a 1-point Pokemon. If you're forcing prep, I feel like you're doing your job. And Shedinja is going to force prep, whether that be with status or super effective coverage. And, you know, maybe that makes a move pool less potent as it typically would. Or you bring the Flex Shedinja and your opponent just cannot touch it. And it ends up walling their win con that they thought they could just easily sweep through you with. So I think that's a really cool aspect of Shedinja. If you want to go check out Sally Mumble, do exclamation point Tauros, definitely go check him out. I'm sure his draft analysis will be up soon today if it's not already up. I know a lot of coaches are putting him up at noon, but go check him out, go show him some love, drop a like on his draft analysis, and support him for the season, especially if you want to see big Lando-I in Draft League this gen. Next up, we have Tiro's last pick.
Yes, so at this point, I mean, do you want to just cover the teams you've been doing?
Oh yeah, I guess I can just cover them. Yeah, we have Tiro.
It's up to you.
No, yeah, that's fine. We have Tiro picking up Eldegoss. A Pokemon I personally hate is the only bad Pokemon with Regenerator, so I hate him. This Pokemon is extremely passive, but it does offer Rapid Spin and Sleep Powder as well as Regen, which is still the best ability in the game, and it does give it some viability at the very least. Now, do I think he really needed this? Not necessarily. I suppose he got it for the Rapid Spin option because he already has the Ground Resist and Grass type in Tangrowth. But in case there is a matchup where he doesn't want to boots everything and doesn't want to run Defog Rotom, this does give him that option to bring the Eldegoss. Or if he just wants to use it as a, you know, decent pivot with regen, maybe like an eject button, sleep powder, and things like that, he can definitely do so. It's not my favorite pick in the world, but I do like his team overall. Really, outside of this Eldegoss, I love this team. So if you want to check out Tiro, go show some love for this season. Very solid player. He just recently won SBU. He played great in APA. And is a really solid player overall. So if you go show him some love, go check out his draft analysis and give him some support for the season, and watch Urshifu click buttons with Gengar. So really, really fun team he looks like he has here. Next up, we have Kurt. Oh my gosh, is it me again? This is me again. Picking up his Pikachu, and he wanted his own special slide, and he made him. So I wasn't going to tell him no. Kurt loves himself some Pikachu. He had 1 point. He really wanted to pick up Pikachu. I don't know if I can really give much more input. There's matchups where Pikachu can go crazy. He doesn't have an electric. It really doesn't like compound on any rolls that he doesn't have. It gets Surf and Grass Knot for grounds. Grass Knot boosted by Terrain, in fact. But it's a funny mon. It's not crazy. It might come to a matchup and get a couple kills, and then Kurt will lose his mind. So if you want to see him do that, as well as all of his other shenanigans, check him out. I just put ! Landers in the chat. Go sub to Kurt. He's come back to creating content, and he's personally my favorite YouTube content creator when it comes to Pokemon. He makes great stuff, so definitely go check him out. Check out his season and show him some support. Your turn.
My team. Finally, Owen got a little bit much of a talking off here, so we're on Amel right now, letting Owen rest up a little bit. Which, if you want to check out Amel's team, of course, once it loads on the screen at least, I'll put. Oh, never mind. Owen already beat me too. We have the Scorupies, of course, so you could check that Amel out. But if you did not guess the theme of the team off of this last pick, Dusk Noir, Amel wanted to leave off specifically 69 points in his draft. Why Amel thought to do this, I don't know. But he really must have thought that he was a free guarantee for playoffs and really wanted to push himself.
Nice in the chat.
I appreciate that Amel, if anything, is an innovator, if nothing else. You know, really trying to make top point Hawlucha be the peak. Just wish that he didn't draft, like, Lilligant to do it. Like, there were... I don't know, I feel like there were better things with the budget. Do I like Amel's team? I think it's funny. I think Amel's still a guaranteed playoffs somehow. I don't know how I could say that. And I don't mean it for April Fools. I will still say that if you ask me on April 2nd on the comment section of this stream, I'll respond to you. And I'll tell you on April 2nd that I do think Amel is a lock for playoffs. So if you want to check out Amel, of course, check him out with the Scorpies link. It is a great way to check out Amel and support the man.
Oh yeah, he has fun. And I could say Amel has the most fun. And out of all of like the Wi-Fi people who decide to like do like cheesy random shit and like try and make it work, he's the person that will get it to work the most often. He is a very good player, and if he wanted to try, he would very easily, I think, be a top 3 player in the format. And it's not that he's not trying, he likes to win with the mons he thinks are fun and are funny. So I think that makes him really entertaining to watch. So I definitely go check him out. Next up, we have my Sudowoodo. Speaking of fun mons.
Yes. So we are back to the Owen pick, which if you're somehow watching this and you're not already subbed to Owen and haven't already left like in the stream and haven't already shown your support to Owen monetarily by donating your social security card, you should do that. With that said though, Sudowoodo, I mean, I don't really know what to say about this pick, I'll be honest. It's probably just our stealth rocker, but like, it is still really funny if nothing else that that Owen got the Sudowoodo. I think it's a really cool Pokemon at the very least, with obviously Surdy being better this gen. It's a good lead, if nothing else. And I mean, unironically, it's not a bad flying switch in for the team, so that way then Thundurus and Heatran can be a little more offensive. So, it's pretty good for it, if nothing else.
It might come to a game. That's about it.
It might come to a game. That's about it.
Oh, for sure. Next up, we have Liv rounding out the Hail Stall team with Big Zolt, 17-point Arctozolt. Absolutely broken mon. Bolt Beak plus Icicle Crash is really, really hard to switch into, or Freeze Dry as well as another option for like the grass grounds of the world, like the Seismitoads and the Swamperts. This thing is an absolute demon and gives Liv a little bit more of an option to spec into a more balanced team where she still has that breaker and something like an Arctosaur, maybe offensive Starmie, offensive Kyurem, as well as that really solid defensive backbone. I think this Pokemon is really, really solid in that aspect and can really punch through a lot of teams and support the rest of this team offensively well and kind of speed up that inevitable process of your team being worn down for the stall build. So I think this draft is really well done structurally, and, you know, building that solid stall team that can kind of flex into different roles and covers itself very well in a lot of different aspects. But if you want to go check out Liv, you haven't checked her out, my co-host, yet she just linked her stuff in the chat right there. Go check it out. This may be the final ride. After the stream, go check out her draft analysis, all that good stuff. And yeah, Liv's return to draft for how long? Who knows?
Yeah,
but it'll be fun. Cop a shirt. Keep the merch. Next up, we have Amoonguss.
Amoonguss. Right, I forgot. I was.
You're like, all right, keep going. Yeah.
No, I grabbed it. I was grabbing the merch like it's really got the merch. No, so anyway, so Among Us. This is a pretty sussy Baka pick, I won't lie. Don't like it. No, I'm kidding. It's actually kind of a cool fit here. I mean, realistically, just regen with all momentum. Not that, you know, Dr. Slacking has a regen core, but it does at least offer some sort of reliable recovery just by switching, which there are actually a lot of pivots on this team, to be fair. So it is kind of a cool pick if nothing else for that. It's a bit more of a defensive fairy check than Toxtricity would have been, so it takes some pressure off of Aegislash in that regard. The Spore support could be pretty cool for opening up setup, as well as the foul play support with how naturally bulky this is for opposing setups Pokemon. If you want to check out Dr. Slacking's team, of course, it was just linked above with the Whimsicott's tag, of course, and you can feel free to check out Dr. Slacking and support his season as well this time around.
Oh, 100%. Next up, we have Joe. Another one for you.
Another one for me. Yes. Now we're making up those picks that I lost earlier. So with the Solrock pickup here, Joe ended up getting himself another rocker, which finally at least ties with the Toxic Spike setters. Solrock, if nothing else, I think for 2 points is actually a kind of cool pick here. I just kind of wish that it wasn't as arguably mandatory as it feels like, because it unironically does feel a little mandatory, weirdly enough. And I really hate that I'm saying that, but I mean, Solrock is cool if nothing else. I mean, it's a ground immunity, which actually is pretty clutch for the team that is so weak to ground with a Koko and Victini, of all things. So I do think if nothing else, I mean, Joe at least saw the value in the 2-point Pokemon more than I think he did the 10-point Vikavolt, but I'm still looking forward to seeing how he does with this team. I think it definitely, as I said, it has a lot of routes that can work. I know that I definitely gave a couple of Joe's picks a bit of a hard time, but I do think if nothing else, Joe has options to really make this work and really get a win. Well, not a win, a few wins this season. I just wish it was a little more cohesive was all.
Oh, no, for sure. Did you link Joe? Perfect.
Yes, I did link Joe. If you want to check him out, his draft analysis will be up at some point, either right now, if not later today.
Perfect. And then we have D-Ray right here, picking off the, ending off the draft, I would say, with a round 11 Gigalith. Really good budgeting, also being able to, you know, make sure that he got this in the last round, being able to plan out his picks and get the things he needed before this. Like I said, I don't think Drill is really worth it without a sand option, personally, when it comes to the point price in Generation 8. But with the sand, it becomes a lot more potent, and I really do like this team a lot more in having this, and it really helps with the speed problem with this, really, because it was only Talonflame. The rest of the team was incredibly slow outside of Scarfers, so this does help it out a fair bit. Gives them another rocker as well, so again, more reliable rocks outside of just Miltank, Excadrill, and I believe that's it. So this thing being probably the rocker in 9 out of 10 matchups. If you want to go check out D-Ray, if you haven't done so already for some reason, definitely go do so. Yes. He makes great content, incredibly entertaining dude. And
he's the commissioner by proxy. He is the proxy commissioner for Kurt.
He is the boss man right now. So if you want to go check him out, I definitely recommend doing so. D-Ray makes great content, but I'm sure you all know that. And then I think, is that it? We have one more. What a way to end it off with a powerful pick.
Pat Malamar. So Pat Mac got himself another Ghost Check, which, as I said earlier, Kang isn't exactly the best Ghost Check. However, having Kang Malamar, if nothing else, two wrongs may not make a right, but in this case, I think it at least makes a left. So we'll take that. Malamar is a pretty cool option, actually, unironically, for this team. It's a cool Trick Room route, which, weirdly enough, Pat Mac could actually kind of make work with stuff like Selly and even to an extent Serena, depending on how fast the team is. Like against a team like Haze's, Trick Room would have ripped that with the Trick Room that could actually pull off for like a weakness policy offensive Selly that can maybe take advantage of Dragapult, or even maybe just in general like a Meteor Beam set. There are a few other matchups too, of course. I don't want to really dig into Pat Mac's matchups here because one, we haven't done that for anyone else, and two, I don't want to spoil prep, but I do think that Pat Mac, weirdly enough, does have some cool Trick Room with this team, which is weird, you know, with a team like Raikou, Landorus, you don't really think of Trick Room, but he could actually kind of pull it off with the build he has. Oh, I don't think that Pat Mac is necessarily like a top 5 team or anything, but he did a really good job at rounding out his team with nothing else. I think personally, in terms of the top teams, I don't know about you, but taking out my own team from rankings because I don't feel like I want to rank myself, I would definitely say in order it's probably Keegan, then Kaz, and then shockingly enough, I would put D-Ray's team at 3rd, which I really hate saying. Not that D-Ray's a bad player, but D-Ray's definitely inconsistent. But D-Ray's been really killing it on his drafts lately. Like, I don't know what's in the water he's been drinking at Cali.
Too. Yeah.
His I don't know what's in the Cali water lately, but he's like really been killing it in his drafts lately. He definitely has, in my opinion, the 3rd, if not even the 2nd best team. It's definitely one of Kaz or D-Ray there for 2nd, and then I would put Keegan first. What do you think is the top 3?
Oh, I really like Keegan's team a lot. I like Kurt's team a lot. Maybe it's because I feel like I would perform really well with it. It looks really comfortable. I also like J-Bear's team a lot. Kaz's team is great as well. I don't know. So I do have a question. Isn't Josh doing PRs for this one too? So we could also plug Josh for that. So yeah, if you want to see PRs, you want to get his link?
Josh said that he might be able
He might.
to.
Okay, he might.
So
I didn't know
I'll
if he
put this in
planned on
case.
doing so. Regardless,
He said that he at least was thinking about it.
Mhm.
It just really depends on the time thing, I guess.
yeah.
He's gonna look at drafts today though and figure out if he had it in his schedule. But just if they do end up going up, here's Josh's link. They might not, to be fair, but regardless, I mean, Josh still former NCP coach, still helps out with the season if nothing else.
Mhm.
Still did at the very least our Showdown power rankings. So if nothing else, if you want to check out some,
Oh yeah, and you
Showdown
could
teams,
learn out the
it's a great way to plug after this.
with PLA teams and stuff like that. I am gonna so if you want to plug that, and I think we're pretty much all good.
Yeah, so a little bit later than we would have liked to go, I'm not gonna lie, but we still managed to get pretty close to that 3 o'clock marker. Obviously, you know, if you enjoyed what you saw, leave a like on the stream and check out the coaches and see who you want to support. Regardless though, I had a lot of fun here today, and hopefully we have a wonderful season.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Like Liv said, go check out all the coaches. My draft analysis went live 14 minutes ago, so if you want to jump right over here to over there, go like that video, watch it, and then we have all the coaches in the description. Go check them all out. Go drop likes. Go let coaches know what you like about their teams. Comments help them out a ton, so go do that as well.
Like
and
too, 'cause you did.
Yeah, go to
Sorry,
the
I'm plugging your
NCP.
channel.
Yeah. And then I'm going to do
Yeah.
exclamation point NCP one more time. Again, join the server, hang out with the coaches, get your roles, all that fun stuff. Watch our Showdown division, which is doing Legends Arceus with, you know, mods like Ursaluna, Basculegion, all that cool stuff, and Amorous. So if you want to see how those mods may function in the Gen 9 metagame, a little preview, that could be fun as well.